Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, your niche sports connoisseur, and we made it. Selection Sunday is behind us. We had a great time yesterday in the watch party. Thanks to everybody who hung out with us. Thanks to Razzle and Adam for co-hosting that with me. Great insight as always. We are excited. We are churning out the content at FTN. You do not want to miss it. March 20, that promo code still going on. 20% off discounts across the whole entire site from a DFS, betting, dynasty, season long, everything, the VIP package. You can pay per month. So you can check us out for that month. If you like what you see, you like what you've done, you like the money that we've helped you make, stick around with us and see what we have in store. There's plenty more happening. MLB team is off and running. NFL team's already getting ready, believe it or not. I'll be taking my little break in between niche sports there, but WNBA, TBT, all that stuff, I'll be around. You know I will. But I love it, man. This is our time. We have so much going on. Obviously, the NCAA tournament is here, but that's not all. We have the CBI. We have the NIT. We have that new Crown tournament, which is done by Fox. That includes Big East teams, Big 12 teams, Big 10 teams. They also invited Boise State and George Washington, which is pretty cool to see. A bit of drama there with the tournament stuff. West Virginia being left out. If you consume any content regarding college basketball, you probably heard a lot about West Virginia today. They're going to be suing the NCAA because of their status of being left out. We do have our good friend in the Discord in our community, EWR, mentioned that Javon Small and a few others in the program were not willing to play in any other tournaments. They did not accept NIT invite, and they did not accept the Crown invite. There's a little bit of misinformation and confusion there with the Crown tournament. Was said that the top two remaining teams that didn't make the big dance would be obligated to play from the Big East, Big 12, Big 10. I don't know how that actually worked out, but whatever. We've got a ton of basketball. And the cool thing about that Crown tournament is it takes place beginning after the first couple of rounds of the NCAA tournament. And then their title game is the Sunday before National Championship Monday. So we get back-to-back title games, which is extremely exciting. And you can count on coverage for all of that as well. Things really get started tomorrow with the play-in game / NIT slate. So there's a 9-game slate on deck for Tuesday, likely a 9-game slate on deck for Wednesday. I will have coverage with that via article breakdown and projections as usual. Ordinarily, we'd be here hanging out with each other, breaking down that DFS slate. And don't worry, there is going to be plenty of coverage for these DFS slates throughout the first, second round, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and National Championship Showdown. Don't you worry, I will be here. And this kind of kicks off things. I guess yesterday kicked off the real string, but we're going to be going live every single night this week. So tonight is going to be the bracket breakdown. I'm going to be filling out my bracket live on air here, giving my rationale, kind of pinpointing any upsets that I see, my Final Four pick, all of that stuff. So that's going to be happening tonight. And last year when we did this, it was a late show, and got a lot of good feedback there. So I'm excited to fill out my bracket with you guys. Tomorrow's show is going to have a special guest. We haven't had many guests this entire season. I kind of do my solo thing, but we're racking up the guests now. Tomorrow night, you will not want to miss it, 9 p.m. PST. It's going to be like a first look. We're going to talk about the first round. There'll be some DFS talk. There'll be some betting talk. But the great Mike Kutry is going to be joining us tomorrow. He reached out and, things connected. Our schedules aligned. He's going to be giving his take on all the matchups as well. And we're just going to do a super extravaganza tournament show breakdown with Mike Kutry. So, we love that, and everybody should be extremely excited about that one. And then Wednesday night, we'll be going into the full breakdown. That'll be the show roll up your sleeves, get your pens, get your pencils, get your paper. We're going to be breaking down that first round, day one slate for Thursday. It is a 15-gamer right now, but it will be a 16-gamer after the play-in games. So that's going to be a massive slate. The first round always is. 16 games. There's also the 8-gamer for the breakdown and the 4-game night slate. So if you break out early in the 16-gamer, you have other slates that you can do. That one we'll look to have a guest breakdown as well. Haven't quite confirmed who that'll be, but either be our man Adam or perhaps Raz, but we'll have a breakdown there. And then Thursday night, once the Friday slate drops out, we'll go into Thursday night. We'll still be buzzing from the first round chaos that's going on Thursday, but we'll be back here on Thursday night breaking down round 1, day 2 for the Friday slate. That will be full coverage. Expect that one to be a long show as we go game to game. Friday night, we will be doing the round 2, day 1 breakdown for the Saturday slates. Saturday night, breaking down Sunday's round 2, day 2. Then we'll take a little bit of a break there, and then we'll get right back into it with NIT games, CBI betting, all of the other previews, and then we'll get into the Sweet 16. So it's going to go fast. Tons of content, tons of coverage. Over on FTN right now, you can see regional breakdowns for every single region from myself, Mike Randall, and the great Ryan Coleman. We also have a ton of other content, some free stuff that's come out. March Madness Frauds article is out now for free that I had put out. Please support the content in any way that you can. There'll also be a piece that comes out tomorrow, easiest paths to the Final Four. Mike dropped a first four breakdown, bet stuff. There's just everything going on, man. March 20, get yourself a 20% off discount and hang out with us. I've been getting a ton of DMs and people reaching out to me on the various platforms saying that, hey, they're on board for this month. They're going to check out the community and they're going to be hanging out with us. And we're going to give you some of that world-class SuperShow CBB Discord on FTN tilt that is so famous here for the last couple of years at FTN, but really we've been doing it for a decade now. So before we get started here on the bracket breakdown, please make sure if you're watching on YouTube that you slap that like button around, let it know you're here. If you're watching on Twitter/X, I do appreciate it. If you can find it in your heart to kind of mosey on over to the YouTube side, give us that support. All the comments, questions, engagements, likes, reposts, retweets, shares, everything all helps us a tremendous amount. We live in a algorithm-based world, and all those interactions help us a great deal. So I do appreciate you guys continuing to support the content and each and every time that we're on board here and on air. Alex is in the house. It doesn't matter if I'm on at 9 p.m., midnight, 3 a.m., 2 p.m., 11 a.m. It just doesn't matter. I can always count on my man Alex, a.k.a. Aquasa. I like to call him that. Checking us out here. NC State superfan. Already calling for Will Wade and McNeese State to just get hammered so that they can get out and they can focus on getting Will Wade to NC State. That's the word. That's what is being said here. Alex says San Diego State wearing West Virginia uniforms tomorrow. Aztecs by 1,000,000. For America! Team America. Was that like South Park creator puppet movie? Pretty graphic, but kind of reminds me of that. Good to see you, though. I do appreciate it very much. So I'm going to share my screen here and get into this. Man, just a lot going on. I'm just absolutely excited. Cannot wait to get my teeth into this Thursday slate. The pricing is already out. I am, believe it or not, working on minutes projections already for that. We'll have full breakdown projections for the slate tomorrow as well. There's just a ton going on. It's just absolutely amazing. But this is our time. This is our Super Bowl. There's no better time than right now in any kind of sport, really. I know there's a Super Bowl, the World Series, and that stuff is all great. The Natty for college football, that's great. I love college football. You guys know that. But the tournament, man, how can you not be romantic about the NCAA tournament? All right, so let's get this bracket up here. Let's do this, huh? Let's fill this bad boy out. Speaking of which, I don't have any plans to do a bracket contest this time. I don't know if FTN might have one. There are a couple of ones that I'm taking part in, RotoWire and a few others. So if you are looking for a bracket that you want to be a part of and you don't have any right now, reach out to me. I'll help you find one. There's a bunch of other stuff that I am a part of and hosting. We have a Fan Tracks League. It's going on, $20 buy-in. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. We still have 4 or 5 spots left in that one. If it fills and there's interest for more, we'll just keep rolling out leagues. There are several Survivor-style leagues that I'm going to be a part of. If you're interested in any of that stuff, please do reach out. There's so much. Don't just play DFS. Do everything else. Bracket contests, player leagues, just everything that you can get your hands on, because in 3 or 4 weeks here, we're going to be feeling kind of sad. It's a bittersweet feeling. We get to that one shining moment, and suddenly it's like, man, college basketball's over. So get involved in all the stuff that you can, okay? You definitely don't want to miss out. Speaking of which, one last plug and promo here before we get into the bracket. Tomorrow morning, roughly 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, it's about what is that, 10, 11 Central, I'm going to be taking part in the RotoWire Player Draft League. We've done that the last 4 or 5 years. I'm very blessed and honored that they continue to ask me back. I don't know if that's a good thing or it's just because I have not performed very well in that league. They keep bringing me back and they foresee me being a donator, but that's fine. That is taking place. So if you're a sub to the Sirius XM platform and the Fantasy Sports channel, you will be able to hear that. They'll be talking about it. I did there was one last spot for a interview slash radio gig there to talk about the picks and the tournament in general. It was between me and Raz, and I took the path of just giving that up to Raz. Now, he thinks I did that for karma purposes because there is a mania portion of the tournament taking place on Thursday, and we may or may not be playing each other. I don't know. But he's under the impression that I'm doing that for karma. It's just out of the kindness of my own heart. I would never do something nice and with the expectation of getting something in return. It's not my style. So, no, but I'm just kidding. He's going to take it. I'm very happy for Raz. He should definitely do that. There'll be lots of opportunities for us to do other stuff. So definitely excited for that. Make sure you're checking that out. And Mike Randall is going to be on, all week talking college hoops too, the daily FTN show that we have. All right. With that being said, we're going to get into it. I'm going to share the old screen here. There are many different paths here, Yahoo, ESPN, all of that. We're going to pull up the Yahoo. Here it is. And we're going to fill it out on here. Let's get rid of this. Let's put me over here. Old reliable custom layout number 7 that you are. There you are. All right. Let's do this. Let's start. You see here the RotoWire bracket challenge. They're giving away a jersey to the winner. So that's a cool thing to be a part of. They got a ton of people who have already signed up. And then just the overall Yahoo best bracket contest was $25,000 to the top entrants. I was talking to somebody today about some large, huge $1 million plus prize for a perfect bracket. Might as well just offer $100 billion because no one's ever going to hit a perfect bracket. And you could sit there and say, well, they said a 16 would never beat a 1. The odds are so astronomically high to hit a perfect bracket. It's just never going to happen unless time travel is a real thing. And I feel like if it was, we would have already seen somebody with a perfect bracket. And if they do have a perfect bracket ever and that happens, that person is going to be grilled. Like, how did they hack the system? Are they from the future? How is that possible? But yeah, lots of prizes to be had here for the top bracket. All right, pulling it up here. We had our first reactions yesterday, as you know. North Carolina getting in, very big surprise. Lots of stuff. We're going to start in let's do the South. Let's start in the South region here. And going through, we have some play-in game stuff. Obviously, we won't factor that in, but we'll start off with Auburn here, the number 1 overall seed, playing the winner of St. Francis, PA, and Alabama State. I do like Alabama State to win that game. St. Francis is hot. I know that Randall likes them a lot. They have just, kind of rolling their way into overtime game after overtime game in the latter part of the season there. This Alabama State team is really good. You guys know I follow the SWAC and the MEAC a lot throughout the season, especially in the tournaments. Alabama State has a triple-headed monster on offense that can really do some damage. And I do like them to beat St. Francis. We're going to talk about them a lot on the DFS slate there tomorrow. But to Auburn, this is not one of those situations where we get a 16 over a 1. So I am going to put Auburn through there. Janai Broome staying healthy. Good statement win at the beginning. Auburn kind of faltered to end the season. People starting to talk a little bit about, maybe they're going cold. Maybe they're not the team that we thought they were. That's all nonsense. they're going to be just fine. And this is going to be a great opportunity for them to play some of their second unit guys, Tahad Pettiford, maybe some Jaheim Hudson, Ja'Kai Howard. Play those guys, get them some valuable tournament minutes here against Alabama State or St. Francis and get that confidence up, because a very difficult second round matchup is going to be looming here between Louisville and Creighton winner. So Louisville, they got jobbed a little bit. There were several things that happened that I felt a little bit weird about, and so did the media, of course. One being that Louisville got an 8th seed. I put up the tweet that I saw yesterday. Basically, over the last decade or two, the AP number 13 has gotten a 5 seed or better over the last 10 plus years. Now, you might say the AP poll doesn't mean anything, and maybe it doesn't, but it at least has some merit here, because over those last 10 to 15 years, that AP number 13 has been no worse than a 5 seed. They might not look at that, but that's pretty telling. Something here happened. I don't know what. The ACC's down. I get it, but an 8 seed for Louisville, that's pretty silly. They do get a virtual home game here in Lexington, just an hour away from where they normally play. So that will be a huge home court advantage for them against this Creighton Blue Jays team. Creighton also got jobbed as a 9 seed. I felt like they probably should have been a little bit higher. This is going to be a terrific 8-9 seed, and I think the public and the industry as a whole are completely split down the middle. I see a good amount of people on Creighton. I'm on the conglomerate of folks that think Louisville is going to win just because it is a virtual home game. Terrence Edwards playing the best basketball of his life right now. Chucky Hepburn is just a killer. They have some depth, even though Louisville has suffered injuries to key positions, and it does sound like Rain Smith will be back, maybe on a limited capacity, but enough to get some minutes here. And it's impressive that Louisville has played as good as they have, despite not having Corin Johnson, who transferred from Washington, or Kashawn Pryor, who transferred to South Florida. They had all of these top players. They would have been one of the deepest teams in the conference. It just didn't work out that way, but they still were one of the best ACC teams. So thoroughly impressed with them. Creighton, they rely on 3 guys, right? Ryan Kalkbrenner, Stephen Ashworth, and Jemiah Neal. If those 3 are playing well together, they're humming along, they're hard to beat. If just one of those pieces isn't working, Jemiah Neal has an off night, Stephen Ashworth isn't hitting his shots, Ryan Kalkbrenner gets into foul trouble. If any of those things happen, it's very hard for Creighton to compete at their best level, right? And I just ultimately think Louisville is going to win this game. So I'm going to advance Louisville here as the 8th seed. Moving on, we have the 5-12 matchup between Michigan and UC San Diego. I try to stay away from the popular upset picks because in recent history, those ones have just bricked out very, very hard. But I don't know how I or anybody else who watches the games or researches this stuff could possibly not pick the Tritons of UC San Diego against Michigan. There is a lot going for the Tritons here. There's a lot going against Michigan. They just played 3 games in 3 days. Absolute battle in the Big Ten Finals against Wisconsin. And they get a Thursday game in Denver, which feels like it could be troublesome. They're in the altitude. 3 days rest only. It's going to be playing more of a factor than I think people probably realize. And the biggest story of this matchup isn't necessarily the lack of rest, but it's the fact that Michigan is 336th in turnovers per game. The Tritons force the 3rd most turnovers nationally. That's a huge disparity. And yes, UC San Diego is playing Big West opponents, whatever. There are some quality teams in that conference. I don't care what you say. This is a great feel-good story for the Tritons too, right? Making the tournament shortly after completing their 4-year transition from D2. They do lack size, so if Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden are out of foul trouble and competing at their highest level, this will be a game in which Michigan should win. But the turnovers and the lack of consistent guard play is going to rear its ugly head, I have a feeling. The great equalizer here for Michigan is that height, but the Tritons, man, they are just so good defensively. And they also have these kind of classic for them runs. If you've seen the Tritons play at all, there's a point in the game, and especially against Irvine, it happened just, real early in the second half. Irvine had built a lead. It was like, oh my God, are the Tritons going to fumble here? Surely they won't be an at-large team. What's going to happen here? We need the Tritons in the tournament. and they went on one of their patented runs, put the foot on the neck of Irvine, quickly evaporated that 12-point deficit into a 10-point lead the other way, and they just really never looked back. And they do that game after game after game. They just go on these runs, and it's because they force turnovers at such a high level. Those guards on the opponent side, they start getting rattled, and the Tritons just continue to pile it on. So, Aniwa Tate Jones, I did a profile on him in the one of the shorts that we did, so I had to practice that name. So I'm very confident in that name. Listening today to several places try to say that name and struggle, it was pretty comical. Can't wait to hear what Charles Barkley says when he tries to say that name. It's going to be hilariously bad when he does. But yeah, Niwa Tate Jones, that's one that you want to get familiar with. They have a fantastic team. With all that being said, I am going to advance UC San Diego. Once again, I don't love the fact that it's going to be a popular pick, but they just have everything going for them here against Michigan. If ever there is going to be a 12 or a 5 this year, that's the matchup we want to look at. All right, going over to the 4 versus 13 here, Texas A&M. And I'm not going to take that long for every single pick, so don't worry. But that was one I wanted to kind of sink our teeth into. Yale versus Texas A&M. This is going to be a fun game. You know, Yale and the Ivy League representative every year in the tournament, they're usually competitive. We saw, Princeton make that run here recently. Yale's been in games where, they've been possessions away, minutes away from advancing to the next round. It's actually a really good spot for them against Texas A&M. Defensively, Wade Taylor's going to have to deal with Bez and Bang, who is the Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year, and Bang's going to be all up in his grill. Wade Taylor is not going to get any clean looks at the basket. He's going to have to play more of a facilitator role, and I just don't know that the Aggies will be able to handle that. Manny Abesike, if he can hit some shots. Obviously, they have Zurich Phelps, who's been going through it, but I think this Yale team could really have Texas A&M on their heels fast, quick, early, and I think it could fall apart for them very, very quick. John Poulakaitis, if you don't know that name yet, get familiar. Shoots about 40% from long range. He does not need but a single solitary inch, maybe a half inch of space, and he will fire. In the game against Cornell, for a while, it looked like Cornell might pull it off, get the auto bid. He got hot. He hit 5 of 9 from long range, 4 of which were, I believe, happened in the second half. Poulakaitis is an amazing player. He is so good in this system, and it's going to be very hard for the Aggies to keep up offensively, in my opinion, especially if these guys get going. Nick Townsend shooting 51% for Yale, granted on 51 attempts, and Bang shooting 37% on 105 attempts. They've got some dudes who can really hit some shots here, and they've got role players on the second team who can come out and really make some noise as well in various positions. And they have Casey Simmons on their team. That name rings a bell. It should. He played his freshman season at Northwestern a couple of years ago. He's a very solid overall player and defender, and gives them a nice look there as a 4th or 5th option. This Yale team is going to give some problems. So we have ourselves a upset brewing here over Texas A&M, and a classic 12 versus 13 matchup in the second round. So be ready for that. That's going to be a fun one. There he is. There's the man, Razzle. Yale, UC San Diego second round matchup is going to be fun. Absolutely. He knows. There's a man who knows what he's talking about. Love it. Yes, that's going to be a fun one. All right, moving down the line here, Ole Miss as the 6th seed against the play-in game winner of North Carolina versus SDSU. Say what you will about North Carolina, they're in. That's over and done with. They face off against an SDSU team that is not at full strength. Say what you will, and a lot of people kind of overlook or don't think that this injury to Magoon Gwath is really a big deal. But the freshman 7-footer, he started the season out predictably a little bit rough around the edges, but he's really developed into not only a solid shot blocker and rebounder, but he's starting to do some things offensively too. And not having him would be a really big missing piece for them, because we know DVP-wise, North Carolina has not done well with opposing front court players, especially ones who can get it done on the block. North Carolina has gotten a pulse, a revival of sorts from Jalen Withers. We've seen Van Allen Lubin play extremely well. They moved our guy Jalen Washington to the bench, and they've had a resurgence. If Gwath can't go, that's troublesome. If he does go, I think that they get this game from North Carolina. But either way, it's pretty irrelevant in that I think Ole Miss ultimately does win this game. At first, I thought when this bracket came out that I'd be picking against Ole Miss. I know on can't remember it was with Seth Davis or somebody called Ole Miss a fraudulent team. I don't know that they're a fraudulent team. They've got some definitive problems, sure, but they have Chris Beard. Say what you will about him. He's still a great on-court coach. Don't really care about the off-the-court stuff here in this situation. Has a great player that he seemingly has been messing with all season. I don't know if it's a situation where it's like the San Antonio Spurs of the mid-2010s, like they're on the the plan where you play him just a few minutes, you give him some rest here. Like, I don't know what that was. Some frustrating things with Malik Dia. We were fortunate enough to have his like 60 fantasy point game when it happened. It does seem like Beard is realizing where his biscuit's going to get buttered, and he played Malik Dia 32 minutes against Arkansas in the SEC tournament and 30 against Auburn. If Dia is playing 30-plus minutes in the tournament, Ole Miss has got to be considered a threat, and especially in this matchup where if it brews that they're going to be playing against North Carolina, Dia is going to be a problem there. Jermaine Brayfield will be a problem there. If it's SDSU, that matchup is a little more worrisome for me, but I do at the end of the day think that Ole Miss will advance here regardless of who that opponent is. So we'll go ahead and move Ole Miss into the next spot. Iowa State versus Lipscomb. Yale coming for Auburn again. Yeah, Yale just did it, right? The Ivy League, man, they're just so dangerous. It's almost like you have to pencil them into the next round because they're just so good. And nobody talks about them really during the regular season. And I wish that DraftKings would give us that mid-major Friday again with those Ivy League teams, because that surely was a fun experience for us all. All right, Iowa State versus Lipscomb. Really tempted here to push Lipscomb across the finish line. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. Yes, Iowa State at full strength, health, like this is a team that could win the national championship. I don't think anybody could argue that. However, they haven't been healthy and at full strength for a long, long time at this point. They will be going into it without Keshawn Gilbert. Absolute death blow. Tamin Lipsey clearly won't be playing healthy 100% either. He's going to have to play, but how much are they going to get out of him? I think Iowa State will do enough here via Curtis Jones, who will probably take 25 shots. They won't be super efficient 25 shots, but he's going to take them. And then you have Josh Jefferson, who is going to have a pretty sizable advantage on the block. We've seen Lipscomb, at least against other high major teams, especially early in the season, have some struggles there with more athletic front court players. Granted, when they played in Arkansas, that was all the way back in early November, played Kentucky in mid-November. They had some struggles with those bigs. Jacob Ognjesiewicz is great. He had about 17 and 8 against Kentucky when they played, but they had some real struggles there. Amari Williams had 11 rebounds. Let me pull up the Arkansas game. He really struggled against their athleticism early in that one. He did have 16 and 6, which is good for him. But at this point, we expect 20 and 10 from Ognjesiewicz every time out. Zvonimir Ivicevic was blocking a bunch of shots, and it's just really kind of a tough situation here, I think, for Lipscomb. If they were playing Kentucky, once again, like a rematch there, I think they'd have a better chance. But I'm not quite sure, even with the injuries here for Iowa State, that they're going to drop to Lipscomb. So not going to get too fancy here. I wrote up a couple of region breakdowns here, and 14 seeds, they're having success against the threes. We had the one last year. We had a couple in 2021. It happens, but I don't think it's going to happen in this particular spot. So we'll move along. Iowa State. Marquette versus New Mexico. This is a tough one. This is about the toughest on the board 7-10, I think, of the entire tournament. I'm really having a hard time with this one because Cam Jones, easily one of the best guards in this format in a tournament setting. How many guards are better than a scorer like Cam Jones, who also gets his guys involved? It's going to be less about what he does, though, because we know he's going to go off. It's going to be that supporting cast. Can they have that offensive consistency from a Stevie Mitchell? Can David Joplin stay out of foul trouble? Can Ben Gold give them anything? Are they going to have to rely on bench pieces like Royce Parham, Zadie Lowry? They've got some guys here. Chase Ross, which version of Chase Ross is going to show up? There's a lot of variables here for Marquette, and I'm very antsy about picking this game. New Mexico, I love them. Donovan Dent, great. Nelly Jr. Joseph, he's great. Man, in this matchup against Marquette, they've done well defensively against interior opponents all season long. Much better than I thought they would do. They've seemingly sprung a leak here lately. But I don't know how they're going to do against a foe like Nelly Jr. Joseph. Looking at this matchup and agonizing and analyzing it today, I just don't know how he doesn't pull down 15 rebounds. I'll be searching for some good prop numbers on his rebounds in this matchup, but I'm very nervous for Marquette. I'm a little nervous for New Mexico as well because away from home, they're not nearly as good. We know the Pit, that's just a modifier that gives them a huge advantage over their opponents. So to me, it feels like a true coin flip game. And I really don't have the confidence in this one. Probably the least confident I am in any of these picks today. I am going to pick Marquette over New Mexico simply because of Cam Jones. You could argue that Donovan Dent is just as good in a format like this, but I ultimately think Cam Jones throws down like a 40 piece here, and that's going to be enough to get them over New Mexico. Game has overtime written all over it. Michigan State versus Bryant. Said it yesterday on the bracket reaction show, the watch party, that I wished Bryant was playing Alabama because the total would be 200. Alas, they're not. Playing Michigan State. Now, it was plus 19.5 yesterday. Now, I think it might be plus 18.5. I do like them to cover. I think that the offensive firepower they have via Raphael Pinson, the former St. John's transfer, Earl Timberlake, who's been everywhere in between. This is a really good team. Barry Evans. I like what Bryant offers. I hate that they had to play Michigan State in round one. And you know what? These are exactly the kind of matchups where it's like, yeah, it's a good team. They're not going to win. And they turn around and do win. And obviously, Michigan State, they have had some nightmares with this seeding before. And I do, again, once like Bryant to cover in this spot. But I think Jace Richardson, and this is going to be one of those like legacy style tournaments. If the Spartans are able to make a run here, it will be on the back of their freshman Jace Richardson. There will be some clutch shots from a man, Trey Holloman. There'll be some, Jackson Keeler plays that happen, some Carson Cooper, their million big men that they have. That size will definitely come in handy against Bryant. I think they'll have a scare. I think Bryant will maybe jump out early even, and there'll be that talk like, oh my God, is this going to happen? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the Spartans will beat Bryant in advance here to a tough second round matchup. All right, so that takes us to round two in the South here, Auburn versus Louisville. Everybody that I've seen picking brackets from, ESPN guys down to others in the industry, my counterparts here at FTN, looking to pick Auburn to lose as the first one seed to fall out, really. And it's crazy. First overall seed, they were just mowing teams down early in the season, couldn't be beat. But now they start to look a little bit beatable, a little bit softer, a little bit weaker, and they're going to have some spots here that can absolutely trip them up. And this is definitely one of them, the Louisville-Auburn matchup here. Now, defensively, I think Auburn could give Louisville some serious problems here, and they're going to be completely honed in on Terrence Edwards. But the key here is Chad Baker, Mazzara, right? He's going to have to avoid turning into a head case, can't afford to get technicals, can't get himself tossed. He needs to keep it together. If he can do that, they'll beat Louisville. If he can't and has a meltdown, that's going to be a problem. Terrence Edwards just showed he could show out against anyone. Tough Duke defense. He just about carried Louisville as much as he possibly could. Chucky Hepburn here. It's going to be a physical game on the perimeter here, and I think ultimately that X factor being Chad Baker Mazzara, and I think that Bruce Pearl will have him ready. He had his meltdown here just a week or two ago, so maybe he got it out of his system. But I don't think Auburn susceptible, but I don't think I see them losing here just yet. So I will pick them over Louisville. Could be a ruckus environment, though. Louisville fans will be there in droves. All right, we have the fun matchup, 12 versus 13, UC San Diego and Yale. This is going to be a DFS gold mine if we do get it. You've got the Pulakaitis play. You've got a Niwa Tate Jones. I'm just showing off now with that name. But I do think Yale has some problems. That UC San Diego defense is the real deal. You're going to see it against Michigan, and if they do advance, you're going to see them really show out against Yale and give them problems. And they won't give Pulakaitis that space that he'll get against Texas A&M. And if they can remove him from the equation, yes, Yale has other pieces, but I don't know that they will be able to overcome that if he doesn't have a good game. So I do think UC San Diego's their turnover disparity, their elite level defense, and a player that a lot of people are going to be talking about and a lot of people are going to fall in love with. He's got, he's from New Zealand, Tate Jones. He's got that kind of goofiness about him, right? This type of player that just America falls in love with. Krutwig from Loyola. He was the player that people were talking about for years. There's been many others. But UC San Diego does advance over Yale here and get themselves into the Sweet 16. Everybody's picking it. I hate it. I don't want to be super chalky or on the train here. But UC San Diego, you just can't pick against them. They're so good. They're so great. Get them to the game against Auburn there in the Sweet 16. All right, Iowa State without Sean Gilbert and a less than, 100%, maybe not even 75% to Min Lipsey. Chris Beard and Ole Miss. Again, when this bracket dropped, I felt like, man, I might be picking against Ole Miss here early with the play-in game winner. Ultimately, after looking at it, thinking about it, I couldn't do it. Iowa State's going to be hard-pressed. This is a very tough spot. Not having Gilbert, who kind of holds everything together. If Curtis Jones has a bad shooting night, I just don't know what Iowa State's going to do. They've got a team of solid defenders. They've got role players, but Gilbert is just so important. And if Curtis Jones shoots like 2 for 13, 2 for 18, 3 for 20, it's going to be massively problematic. And these Ole Miss guards, they can draw fouls. They can get turnovers committed, get steals. Jalen Murray, we know, can rack up steals. This one has the makings of a very problematic matchup for Iowa State. And it took me a while on this one. I thought about it for quite a bit, but the newfound resurgence in Chris Beard, and trusting in Malik Dia to play 30-plus minutes, allowing his best player to do things here. He's going to be a tough cover for Deshaun Jackson or Josh Jefferson. Dia can hit threes. He can bang down low. There's just going to be too much for Ole Miss here. So in a surprising turn of events from yesterday, I am picking Ole Miss to the Sweet 16. And I still can't quite believe it, but I am doing it. Marquette versus Michigan State. If Marquette can escape New Mexico, I don't think that they can escape Michigan State. Ultimately, they're so deep. They're so good. Izzo in March, yes, they've had their hiccups, but man, he's going to have this Spartans team rolling. They'll be ready for Marquette. What it comes down to is Ben Gold just can't be trusted. And when you look at the rest of the potential front court options they'll be rolling out there, this is going to be a game in which the Spartans are able to roll on with Cohen Carr, Jackson Keeler, Carson Cooper. Perhaps Xavier Booker plays some minutes in this game, but one or two of those front court players are going to have a legacy style game, and that's going to ultimately be the difference. And Cam Jones, he's going to be harassed all game long. Trey Alleman's going to be in his grill. There's going to be a lot of bad shots there taken by Cam Jones. And if they fall behind by even a little bit, I think that they just have the wind knocked out of them, the life sucked out of them a little bit. I think Michigan State doesn't blow them out, but I think we see this one turn into a 9, 10, 11-point win where Marquette just can't quite get close enough. At the end, they're fouling, and it's just kind of a moot point. So I do have the Spartans moving on here to the Sweet 16, taking on Ole Miss. Josh asks, why does Ken Palm hate St. John's offense? Who knows, man? Some of the efficiency sites have some things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but such is life. But St. John's, we'll talk about them in a second. All right, Auburn versus UC San Diego. This is where it gets kind of chalky here. UC San Diego will be a great story getting to the Sweet 16. There'll be those who think, that they got the juice to knock Auburn out, and they definitely could. But this is kind of traditionally where we see those Cinderellas who have made their way here and facing a one seed like Auburn, where they kind of gas out a little bit. Not that they'll just take it as we're just happy to be here. I think UC San Diego is way too disciplined for that. Right? They have a amazing coach in Eric Olin, and they don't win 15 games in a row, 30 overall from just being happy to be there in a situation. I think they'll be in it from the beginning till the end, but Auburn just has too many weapons. And Janai Broom's going to do his thing. That's another one of those matchups that he should really thrive, feast in here against UC San Diego size-wise. If they try to double Pettiford, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly hitting shots, it's just ultimately going to be too much. UC San Diego will go on one of their patented runs, but Auburn has been battle-tested playing an entire season in the SEC. A little bit different than an entire season in the Big West. No disrespect for the Big West. I love the Big West, but Auburn's going to be getting through here. Chris Beard, a resurgence. Hey, he got to the Sweet 16. We can start to pull ourselves away. Coaches like Kelvin Sampson, who had some stuff in their past and been able to get over it. Will Wade's about to get a high major job. A lot of people, if we're honest with ourselves, have some stuff in our past maybe we're not that happy with, but we move on. We change as a person, and I think this is the spot for Chris Beard to really remind the basketball world that, hey, I'm here, I know what I'm doing, and I'm taking this Ole Miss program places. But his journey will stop in the Sweet 16 as well. Izzo versus Beard, it's a great individual matchup there, coaching minds. But I think Michigan State's just going to be too much for Ole Miss. This is a game where I think they scheme to take Malik Adila out, attack him, get into foul trouble, neutralize him, make Sean Padula or Jalen Murray have to beat you via bad shots, turnovers. This is going to be too much for them. The Spartans are going to advance. That takes us to the regional final, Auburn versus Michigan State. I'm really uncomfortable because we're seeing everybody pick 1 seeds this year. I think we're going to have some chaos. I've been pretty steadfast all season about all the parity that we're seeing, throughout. The transfer portal has made it that way. But I think we're going to see a pretty chalky Final Four. I honestly do. The chaos will happen in the various first and second rounds, but I think the top seeds are going to be coming out here in these regions. Auburn versus Michigan State. I do end up leaning towards Auburn. I think Michigan State has the chops to do it. Both teams fairly deep, but I think this is the year that Bruce Pearl kind of, pushes back and gets back to a position where this Auburn team and Bruce Pearl especially are back on the radar as a team that, hey, you guys somehow doubted us as the number 1 overall seed, thought we'd fall out of the tournament early, but here we are winning the South, getting into the Final Four against a tough Michigan State team. Ultimately, Janai Broome is what it comes down to. He's just too powerful, too strong. Super Saiyan Janai Broome. We haven't seen him lately. We're going to see him here. Moving on is Auburn. All right, let's jump over to the East, where we have Duke starting things out in Raleigh. Lucky them. Taking on the play-in game winner of American versus the Mount St. Mary's. I love me some Matt Rogers of American. Going to be all over American on the bet. What are they? Are they -3? I think they're -3 right now. Taking them. Also going to be playing Matt Rogers in DFS. This American team, they're fun. They play at a snail's pace. They are going to win this game. Get into a matchup with Duke. Might be fun for a while. Maybe American gets off to a lead here if they can slow things way, way, way down, depending on if Cooper Flagg plays. I know they're talking like he's going to play. How many minutes is he actually going to get? Do they really need him for this matchup? Probably not. But ultimately, Duke is going to advance here. I don't think we see a 16/1 in this spot. This is an interesting 8-9 matchup, Mississippi State versus Baylor. Now, I'm pretty high on Mississippi State. I have been all season, but they're not doing me any favors by continuing to lose in spots, but they're losing close games. And that's just the benefit, I guess, of being in the SEC. You get a nice profile with your net, but you lose a lot of games and close games at that. And a lot of people have written off Mississippi State and Chris Jans at this point. Baylor, I thought coming into the season with their roster, a healthy roster with Norchad Omier. I thought Jeremy Roach would be a bigger factor. We knew VJ Edgecombe was going to be a very good one-and-done freshman. Rob Wright has been good, although he's in the midst of a freshman wall, which is the most inopportune time to have that happen. Baylor, to me, looked like a Elite Eight, maybe Final Four team coming into the season. They're obviously not that now. Facing a tough SEC team like Mississippi State, it'll be close, as most Mississippi State games are. Sean Murphy, he's going to be problematic for Baylor. Baylor's size, they just don't have it with Josh Oshinowana on the shelf. They've been running, a very small lineup. Norchad Omier has somehow been able to play 38, 39 minutes, not getting into foul trouble. That's great on him. But there's just no size. And they're playing Jalen Celestine at the 4. That's going to be tough, especially against a Mississippi State front court that can absolutely do a ton of damage down low. Yes, Josh Hubbard is great. He gets all the hub as the top guard and a volume scorer, but Cameron Matthews, RJ Melendez, Michael Nwoko, all these guys can do work on the glass. Melendez can shoot threes. Then you got my man coming off the bench there, Kashawn Murphy, who plays every bit of a 6'10", like 240, but he plays like he's 7 foot, 300 sometimes. He's an absolute menace on the glass. He's a bad matchup for Baylor. I know most people are going to be picking against Mississippi State, but I can't do it. Oregon versus Liberty. This is another of the classic 5-12s. I think we'll see a fair amount of people pick Liberty. I had mentioned it yesterday on the show, but I've been saying it for a few days now. Liberty had to avoid a team with an elite big, or they had to avoid a team that could defend a 3. Unlucky for them, they run into an Oregon team that checks both of those boxes. They can defend the 3. They've been a little bit shaky lately, but full season, they've been a pretty good defensive team on the perimeter and at the opponent's 3-point percentage. And they have an elite big in Nate Biddle. And they got my man Kwame Evans, who, man, he's finally getting more minutes. Double trouble, Biddle and Evans. They're playing them together in the conference tournament. That was an interesting look. Liberty's going to have to shoot absolutely lights out. They have the capability with Matheny, but they're not going to get it done in the glass. Oregon would be wise to slow things down, work the shot clock, work every possession, let Biddle finish it. Nobody on Liberty is going to stop Nate Biddle. Oregon is not losing this game. And trust me, as a Washington Husky super fan, I'm looking for any possible reason I can to pick against Oregon or see them lose. Like if Liberty did pull this matchup off, I won't lose any sleep over it. I won't cry. I'll be happy, but I can't pick them to beat Oregon. Unfortunately, this matchup is horrible for Liberty. Arizona versus Akron. This is taking place in Seattle, by the way, session 2. Arizona versus Akron. A lot of people are talking about how Arizona is a pretender, not a contender. I would disagree vehemently. I actually am one of the few in the industry that I think likes Arizona so much. Akron, to me, they've been good, right? They've been a great team this year. I still think their roster, it was much better in years past with Ali, Enrique, Freeman, but they're 28-6. Can't argue it. They play very, very fast defensively. They've been adequate enough, and they've just worn teams down, and they're hot as anyone. They've lost 1 game since the calendar turned 2025. That's impressive, no matter what conference you're in. They have some guys, Nate Johnson, Tavari Johnson, but overall, I don't see them pulling this upset against Arizona. I know the narrative and the talking point for everyone is it's Caleb Love. He can shoot you in games. He can shoot you out of games. Which version of Caleb Love are you going to get? I understand it. We've had years of Caleb Love in the tournament. That's what everybody's going to talk about. But KJ Lewis, let's talk about the super sophomore who is arguably more important to the success of Arizona right now than Caleb Love is. Gasp. I know that might be a hot take, but KJ Lewis is absolutely playing phenomenal basketball right now. And I'm very excited for his future because next year without Caleb Love, he's going to be an absolute dude. Against Houston, rough outing. Everybody does. He had some foul trouble, which sometimes happens. Still managed 11 points, 3 rebounds. But you go up and see the Big 12 tournament matchup before that against Texas Tech. Granted, it's a battered Texas Tech club. 36% usage rate. He had 15 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 blocks, and 2 steals. Best game I've ever seen KJ Lewis play in my life. It excites me a great deal. The game before that against Kansas, 42% usage rate, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 steals, and that was in just 19 minutes. They took care of business against Kansas. They had no answer, and that was just played a few days after they lost on the road against Kansas, and in that one, KJ Lewis was horrible. Not so much on the neutral floor. So for my money, KJ Lewis is the guy to worry about here, not Caleb Love. And yes, Caleb Love could take some bad shots, but the way Lewis is playing, it's ridiculous. They have the, conglomerate in the front court. Henry Visar is very good. Toba Waka when he's not fouling. Carter Bryant, who's another youngster that's rising at the right time. Arizona's got a pretty nice profile. So I don't see Akron beating them like a lot of others do. This is just not a spot that I'm going to be picking. So unlike the South, I think we see the 4 and the 5 here advance, and we have a classic Pac-12 matchup here between Oregon and Arizona brewing. You guys remember the Pac-12? It's been several years now. I know a long time ago, but yeah, kind of interesting there. Let's get to the comments before we move on here. Josh says USDC size scares me versus Michigan, but they have better guard play. Yeah, the size is going to be bad against any opponent. They are going to have to fully take advantage of that turnover disparity and get one of Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden in foul trouble. They probably won't get both of them, but if they can get one of them off the floor, certainly gives them a much better chance. Adam, Michigan State falls short of the Final Four. I can sleep like a baby now. I know you thought, I know Adam thought that I was going to pick Michigan State to the Final Four, and you know, I kind of let you guys believe that, but no, I couldn't do it this time. All right, moving on here. We have another kind of coin flip game here. This wasn't as hard for me to pick as the Marquette New Mexico game. Like honestly, that's gonna keep me up trying to pick that one correctly. But BYU versus VCU, 6 versus 11. VCU has a talented Max Shulga who could very easily be playing P4. They've had Joe Bamisile, who has obviously come from the P4 level. I don't know what that game was with Philip Russell the other day. We won't talk about that. They've got Zeb Jackson. They've got some really nice pieces. They played amazing defense. BYU, a little bit of a different profile here. They're going to try to speed you up. They're going to shoot a ton. They have Richie Saunders, who is a fantastic player. Igor Demon has gone through his ups and downs as a young player, but I do like BYU in this one. I think Big Shot Richie is going to come through here against VCU. And BYU, they, playing in a conference like the Big 12, you've had to go against Houston, Texas Tech, Kansas. There's a fair share of teams that prepared them well for this matchup against VCU. Whereas I don't know that VCU maybe had as many games against a team like BYU. And I do value BYU a lot more than others do. I just see a lot of folks writing them off. In the game where they knocked off Iowa State and then did it again, people still couldn't believe it. So still don't think that they're a team capable of winning a tournament game. And they have a bright future ahead. This is a great opportunity for BYU to kind of let people know we're here. We're going to make noise in the Big 12. We have the number one player in the country coming in next year, and AJ Dispransta. What is this, NIL worth already like $1 million a day at this point. I think he's at like $10 million NIL evaluation. BYU is going to be good for years. This is not a blip. So Big Shot Richie comes through though against Max Shulga for me. Wisconsin versus Montana. Brand favorite Money Williams of the Montana Grizzlies. Can he do it against Wisconsin? We could see a shoot off here. We could see a John Tonye versus Money Williams shoot off. How fun is that about to be? Now, Wisconsin fans, they are mad, and they have a right to be mad. They don't end up in Milwaukee. They get jobbed a little bit. They've got to go out here and play in a tough environment. It's all bad. It's all bad. I feel for Wisconsin. I really do. And a lot of people on the other side of it, why is Michigan still a 5? Why is Wisconsin a 3? I think the committee has proven, no matter who's on it, that they don't really give a damn about the Big Ten tournament, and whoever wins it, they're just going to keep it how they had it before the weekend. So I think that's all that was. But Wisconsin versus Montana, they're going to get a scare. Oh, yes, they're going to get a scare. This Montana team, they have the profile of being the 14 to knock off a 3. It's going to happen in this tournament. A 14 is going to beat a 3. I am very, very confident in that. I don't know that it's going to be this spot, though. Money Williams is worth the price of admission. Montana was just on a few slates here recently with the Big Sky Championships. So some of you who don't know who he was, you got a chance to get acclimated. He's fun. Coming off the bench, he's great. It's almost unbelievable that he doesn't start. And my man Austin Patterson, who had a great game on the DFS slate there, he projected extremely well. We couldn't figure it out. Why was he projecting that way? And he had 1 million steals. But this Montana team definitely has the chops to compete with Wisconsin. Perhaps a cover is in the works, but they're not going to beat the Badgers. All right, 7 versus 10 here. This one I'm not struggling with at all. The New Mexico Marquette 7-10, it's a tough one. This one here, St. Mary's Vanderbilt, they've been awesome this year. Mark Byington is I don't care what anyone says, an amazing coach. What he's been able to do in this first year with Vandy is nothing short of amazing. We saw Jerry Stackhouse fumble all over himself, struggle to make this work. Now, granted, Stackhouse had this weird rotation where he'd start someone different, a different group of guys every single game, thinking that was going to work. I don't know what that was. But Byington, he was successful at Georgia Southern. He was successful at James Madison. He's going to be successful here at Vanderbilt until he gets another job that's inevitably going to come calling. 32-4 last year with JMU, and they won a tournament game. Don't think they're going to win a tournament game this year, but they won 20 games. Vanderbilt has been so porous over the last few years with Stackhouse, 9-23 last year. They were a 22-win team, a couple of years ago, 19-win team before that, 9-win team 3 years before that. Just a lot of up and down performances there, and not a lot of postseason basketball, at least in the postseason, that matters for Jerry Stackhouse. But Byington will have Vanderbilt in the tournament repeatedly, and giving him another season to get his guys in there, work the portal, and maybe even keep some guys there. I think Jason Edwards has another season. MJ Collins, Tyler Nickel, Devin McLaughlin, all those guys have another year if they decide to stay. Tyler Tanner's only a freshman. I think they only really lose AJ Hoggard. Nobody's sad about that. I know Adam's not, and Chris Mannion. So great continuity potentially here. Plus, he'll get some more of his guys in. So all that to say that Vanderbilt's great, but they're going to lose to St. Mary's. If this was like a non-con game where St. Mary's decided to travel to Vanderbilt's court, I would be very worried for them. Being that's a neutral court game, I'm not worried at all. St. Mary's has a tremendous starting five, possibly one of the best starting fives in the country. If not the best, a top 5 starting five, you have to admit. They have some pieces on the bench as well. Mitchell Saxon, Augustus Marshall-Lunas, Luke Barrett, Paulius Moraskis. Like, they've got some pieces here that are really good. Foul trouble tends to rear its ugly head here for them, and Jordan Ross is really in a slump right now, which isn't great, but they have a really nice team. They're going to beat Vanderbilt. Alabama versus Robert Morris. Watching Randall's show yesterday after he got on after us, they were psyched. They really liked Robert Morris. I like Robert Morris too. Robert Morris is one of those mid-major, low-major teams that just is very likable under Andrew Toole. They have a couple of players like Cam Woods, transferred in from NC State, and Alvaro Fulgueras, who we've affectionately referred to as Folgers in the Discord. Really nice inside-out game between those two. They have the shot blocker, who's a little undersized, but he is just a rim-protecting extraordinaire, can jump out of a building. Amarian Dickerson, when he's not fouling. And they have some other secondary pieces that make them really exciting. I think from a DFS standpoint, the Robert Morris mini stack is going to be really, really advantageous, possibly optimal with 2 of them, depending on the prices there for Cam Woods and Alvaro. Also, Alabama might be without Grant Nelson, right? That's going to be the big storyline here. We have several teams with injuries that we're going to be tracking on FTN. I'll plug it right now, going to have an injury tracker that I update every day, possibly even multiple times a day. And this will be one team that we monitor here with Grant Nelson. They're going to need him. This isn't one of those spots where you could sit here and say, Iowa State without Gilbert, maybe they'll be okay. Duke without Cooper Flagg, they'll be fine in their first round matchup. Alabama could be in some trouble here. They have Mo Diabate. He's going to be a monster in this game. He's going to be a real problem for Dickerson. I think there's going to be fouls galore, but Diabate is going to have to stay disciplined as well. We're going to have to get big shot Mark Sears here right away. The tournament starts. He's going to have to show up immediately. There's no off days, no bad days for Mark Sears if Alabama wants to survive. They're also going to have to see the good version of LeBaron Philon. He's only a freshman. It's easy to forget. God, he was awful in their last game against Florida. That can't happen. You're going to have to see him hitting shots as well, especially if Grant Nelson is any kind of limited here. So with that being said, Alabama is on upset alert against Robert Morris. I think Robert Morris can cover. Ultimately, it's going to be a fun game for DFS purposes, as Bama games tend to be, but I do not see them losing to Robert Morris here. Still rather would have seen these two flipped, like Robert Morris going against Michigan State, Bryant going against Alabama, but this is what we have. Alabama moves on. Duke versus Mississippi State. Again, I like Mississippi State, and this will be a gut check here for Duke. These second-round matchups for the 1 seeds, you tend to see, especially the really good ones, they get a scare in the second round. Happens all the time. These 8-9 seeds, they're typically teams, they're in the top 25. They have a solid profile. A lot of them sometimes have 25 wins and at least 1 or 2 marquee players. So this is going to be a real big litmus test for Duke. And they're going to need Cooper Flagg for this one, definitely. I foresee Mississippi State guys being in foul trouble throughout. The Duke refs do travel well with Duke, and Raleigh's not that far. So I do worry about Mississippi State here, and I think that you see a pretty big game from Duke's. I think Cooper Flagg plays a lot of minutes, but I think it's the secondary pieces that you see have the games. Zion James, Tyrese Proctor, maybe some Malowak out there. I think those are the guys that kind of hard carry here, while as Cooper Flagg maybe not a decoy necessarily. That's the wrong terminology to use, but not the focal point. And Colin Knippel ultimately hitting some big shots there. Josh Hubbard can certainly shoot Mississippi State into this game. But similar to Caleb Love, he can shoot them out of it as well. And there are a lot of inconsistent pieces. Riley Kugel, Claudel Harris. These pieces for Mississippi State are really good. But, man, the consistency has just been out the door for this team. But when they're clicking and they put it all together, they really are as good as anyone out there. So do not think that they can't beat Duke. And I'll be interested to see what that line looks like if these two play. But I think Duke ultimately is going to advance. All right, the battle of the Pac-12 foes, the former Pac-12 foes, Oregon versus Arizona. And I know everybody and their mom will be picking Oregon in this game. People love Oregon for some reason. They've got Nate Biddle. They've got some really nice pieces. They got a scorer in TJ Bamba. But do we really think their guards are that good? I mean, Jackson Shelstad, people just love Jackson Shelstad for some reason. He's good, don't get me wrong, but he's certainly not an elite guard when you look at the rest of the tournament field. TJ Bamba, volume scorer, okay. We've seen Jadrian Tracy play his way out of a starting gig onto the bench, barely playing. Sean Bartholomew has been hit or miss, but he's the role player from Colorado. Like, this team is good, but people act like they're great. And I know it comes down to the fact that their coach is Dana Altman, and Dana Altman is a fantastic coach. And I realize as a Washington Husky fan, we're terrible. So any Oregon fans who may be tuning in for the first time thinking, who the hell is this guy and why is he saying the Ducks aren't good? I know you guys are much better than us this year. Understandable, but I'm going to talk my smack about Oregon. They're no good. I think that they're going to run into a good version of Caleb Love here, but also just a determined Arizona team that just isn't getting, like, they have no pressure whatsoever because nobody expects them to even get through the first round. Nobody's looking at them with any sincere worry, and I think that's a problem. And maybe I'm too high on KJ Lewis. Maybe I'm too high on Arizona as a whole. They also have a good coach, right? And I think that this is just a spot where Arizona gets it done. One way or another, it's going to be close, sure. Oregon has some marquee wins, maybe a few more than Arizona, who dropped games early in the year to Duke, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, West Virginia, but they figured it out. And 22-12 teams don't get a lot of hype, and I get that, but Tommy Lloyd knows what he's doing, and this roster is much better than I think people are giving it credit for. I would like to see Tommy Lloyd switch up his starting lineup, get away from Anthony Del Orso a little bit, get away from Trey Townsend, last year's tournament darling, just not working out for him. Get us more Carter Bryant, get us more KJ Lewis, more Henry Visar, play those guys 30-plus minutes, good things are happening. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Arizona to beat Oregon. And I know I'll be the only one in the world to probably do so outside of Arizona's fan base itself. All right, moving on here, we have the 6 seed taking on the 3 seed Wisconsin. I have a ton of Badger fans that I talk to on a daily basis, interact with, so I have to be careful here. I'm really concerned for Wisconsin. John Tonye, and I asked this question to Raz last night on the live watch party, has it come down to a situation where Wisconsin is only going to go as far as John Tonye takes them? If he has a great shooting night and he puts up 30 real, like, they're going to advance, right? But what happens when he doesn't score 30? What happens when he doesn't score 20? What happens when he, in the Big Ten final scores less than double digits? That's a problem because John Blackwell, he can get his, sure. Max Klesman, he can hit threes, sure. He's not creating his own shot, and if Tonye is not getting it done, well, Klesman's just not going to have the space to shoot. Nolan Winter, invisible on offense. Steven Crowell, he has his moments. BYU has some physical front court options. A guy like Kebakaita is going to absolutely brutalize Steven Crowell on the glass. what are they going to do on there's bench pieces are going to come in. Kamari McGee, who can get hot, but he hasn't really been lately. Like, this is a problematic spot here for Wisconsin. And if it's VCU that gets through and not BYU, it could be even worse for Wisconsin, because defensively they're going to be in Tanya's ass. And that's going to be really rough. So I am picking against Wisconsin. It breaks my heart to do so. I picked Wisconsin deep in prior tournaments, one of the last two, to the Final Four, and an early exit is what smacked me around. Perhaps this time I pick an early exit and they go far, and I would be fine with that. I like Wisconsin. I think that's a product of talking to Wisconsin's fans every day. I identify as an honorary Wisconsin fan here for the time being. But Big Shot Richie is going to show up here, and I think this is one of those games where Igor Demin does things. Early in the season, he was popping off for near triple doubles. People forgot about how good he is. I think that BYU they have a few more weapons than Wisconsin does. And if the Tanya variation that shows up is 2 for 15 shooting, that's just going to be a 0.001% chance that they're able to beat BYU, especially if BYU is hitting shots. Dallin Hall shows up. That's just going to be tough for the Badgers. So I do have the upset here with the 6 seed BYU beating Wisconsin. If VCU gets through, I think they can beat Wisconsin too. St. Mary's versus Alabama. And this one may end up being trendy. Maybe not so much right now, but St. Mary's is a terrible matchup for Alabama. Simply put, the DVP against Bama that we've taken advantage of all year long, even though they have Cliff Omarui and Mo Diabate, 2 shot blocking machines and physical front court options, the nature of the way they play, fast pace, shooting all those threes, it just leads to huge games for opposing big men. Teams that can rebound well tend to do well against Alabama. And St. Mary's has several guys who can rebound extremely well. This is an official upset notice for Arizona, or for I got so many screens open, for Alabama here. This is a spot where I'm going to be, if St. Mary's is like, anything beyond plus, I don't know, 3 plus 4, if we get anything, longer than that, to me, it's a generational wealth opportunity, because I'm very confident in St. Mary's straight up on a neutral court against Alabama. When you look at the various options, Mitchell Saxon, 11th best offensive rebounding rate, 16.2%. Paulius Maraskis, combined rebounding rate of 34.1%, top 60 defensive rebounding percentage. They have the 7'1" off the bench, who's surprisingly athletic and can do some things versatile wise. Harry Wessels, who has a combined rebounding rate of 32%. I mean, there's just a lot of meat here for St. Mary's on the glass. And it's especially going to be problematic if Augustus Marshalunas is hitting shots. I guess the one thing you can say here is St. Mary's profiles a 3-point shooting team isn't great. So if they get into a shoot-off with Alabama, that could hurt them a great deal. Absolutely. But if Alabama is not hitting shots, St. Mary's is able to milk the clock and draw fouls. This could quickly become a game in which Alabama just can't compete. St. Mary's isn't going to get into a run and gun matchup with Alabama. That just doesn't make any sense, right? But they have the options on the front court to really give Alabama fits. They're going to need Aiden Holloway to step up. They're going to need the good variation of Phylon. They'll need a healthy Grant Nelson. There's a lot of things that have to go right here for Alabama. Only 1 or 2 that have to go right for St. Mary's, honestly. So I am going to pick St. Mary's, and this is one I saw a field of 68 guys last night also chirping about, so that might push the public a little bit more towards St. Mary's, but I do see them winning. And I think the various bets of St. Mary's to the Sweet 16, St. Mary's to the Elite 8 can be had for, I think I saw plus 290 to the Sweet 16 on FanDuel. Like, those are all very sharp bets. St. Mary's going to beat Alabama if it works out that way. All right, this gets us into regional, or for the opportunity to be in the regional final. Duke versus Arizona, and their kind of classic matchup of 2 historic powers. I like Arizona a lot. I do. Been adamant about that, and I feel like I'll be in a very low percentage minority of people that picks Arizona to the Sweet 16 in general. Don't think I can pick against them here against Duke. Cooper Flagg, gets to sleepwalk a little bit in that first round matchup. like I said, against Mississippi State, they'll need him, but I don't know how much energy he'll have to necessarily exert. Like, I don't know that he's going to have to win them the game there. He will need to against Arizona, and this will give him some additional time to kind of heal that ankle. This injury is a weird one because it was in the NBA. They just shut him down for a month or two, right? That would not even be a question, but they don't have that kind of timeline here for Duke. He's going to show out. He's going to remind everyone why he's a projected #1 pick. Con Knippel still doing his thing. Maybe we get some Isaiah Evans, 3 or 4 minute stretch where he knocks down 5 threes. I do think the run for Arizona here ends. Duke, admittedly, I don't want to call myself a Duke hater necessarily. Growing up, I did like everybody in the 90s as a kid, you either liked the Tar Heels or you liked the Blue Devils. Those are the two teams that you really, talked about, looked at, watched at, regardless of where you lived in the country. For me, I was always on the Tar Heel side. So generally, I've been a hater, if you will, of Duke. But this is one of the more likable Duke teams for me. I do think that they get through against Arizona. Another kind of chalky spot here for a 1 seed to survive multiple rounds. Then we get BYU versus St. Mary's, a battle of former WCC foes, right? Big Shot Richie. St. Mary's has that brooding, muscular, just jam-packed front court that can do some serious damage. Keba Kaita's going to have to be at his best. Augustus Marshall-Lonis is going to have to hit some shots. I think this is one of the more intriguing potential matchups in the Sweet 16. I am picking St. Mary's. I'm going to throw some bets in the tracker here on St. Mary's and in the Discord for them to make the Elite Eight regional final. But I do think that they'll just be too much for BYU. BYU has the pieces. This will be a great run for them, and this will set them up very well for next year because a couple of wins in the tournament raises your profile with the transfer portal. You have the #1 high school recruit coming in. Guys are going to want to play for BYU. No drop-off without Mark Pope. There's going to be guys lining up to play at BYU. They might not have a lot of NIL money left after AJ, but there'll be guys wanting to play for them, and they'll be a hyped-up team, which is crazy to say. In this era of college basketball, anything is truly possible, and we might see a very hyped BYU team on ESPN like Zion Williamson's 1 season at Duke. That's a very real possibility. What a time to be alive. St. Mary's does beat BYU here, though. This is a great matchup. Very intrigued by a potential 1 versus 7, St. Mary's versus Duke. St. Mary's has, again, the profile to beat just about anyone in the country, but I think Gonzaga may have laid out the blueprint for what you got to do here to stunt St. Mary's. You're just going to have to attack them relentlessly. You've got to get one of Polius or Saxon off the floor. Really the only way you can beat them. If you don't draw fouls on St. Mary's, it is going to be very tough because they're just going to own the glass otherwise. And on the flip side, they got to make sure they keep Malawak out of foul trouble as well. This is like one of the more intriguing front court individual matchups that we'll see between Saxon and Malawak. Duke has, of course, without Malik Brown, which is tough. They could really use him for a spot like this. But we've seen more minutes here recently for Patrick Ngonga. He's been a really solid shot blocker. He's held his own. You've got a guy in Mason Gillis with tournament experience. Like, this would be one of those games where, yeah, you've got Cooper Flagg, you've got Con Knippel, you've got Kaman Malawak, all these great freshmen, but that veteran with that battle-tested experience like Mason Gillis comes off the bench, hits a key three-pointer, takes a charge, hits another three-pointer, suddenly takes the soul out of St. Mary's, and then you have Duke moving on. So one of those little-used secondary role players. This is the reason why they brought Mason Gillis on the team. They didn't bring him there to be a star. Didn't bring him there to be a starter. Didn't bring him there to really give him all that many minutes. Some games he plays like 5 minutes, and he's fine with it. He's completely fine with it because he knows, and we know, he had a conversation with the coaching staff that said there's going to be a moment, there's going to be a time in that tournament where you're going to have to step up off the bench, probably cold, and hit a key three-pointer to bury someone's soul. Can you do that? If the answer is yes, welcome to Duke. We're going to take care of you. You need to take care of us when we call your number. This is where they're going to call Mason Gillis's number, and he's going to deliver. So Duke is going to advance. I hate it. I don't want to pick ones to the Final Four. I don't. I don't want to have a Final Four with all ones. Might as well work for ESPN. But that's where we're at. Duke and at Auburn advancing so far. This is fun, yeah. This is great. I love this. Is my favorite, one of my favorite shows every year because it's just so fun to narrate it. It gets me quite excited. Where do we want to go next? West or Midwest? Let's go Midwest here. Houston as the 1 seed taking on SIU Edwardsville. SIU's got some dudes, man. This is a tough one for me because I would have liked SIU to be in the play-in game because I want to use some of their players. We had some prop betting opportunities on SIU here earlier. They've got a guy in Rayshawn Taylor who's just a steals machine, best player on their team. He's fantastic. Ring Maleth, Brian Taylor. They've got some guys on their squad. Would have loved to have that opportunity to kind of use them. But going up against Houston, let's not joke around here. Houston will take care of business. Now, Houston, there might be some problems here. Yet another team with injuries, and to the heart and soul of the team, much like, and this is almost a rerun of last year, except different positions, right? Jamal Shed last year getting hurt, absolutely just gut wrench from Houston. Had Shed not gotten hurt, Houston certainly would have made a deeper run, possibly even won it all. They would have given Connecticut a game with Jamal Shed. I'm very confident in that. If Shed came back this year, it's a wrap. Houston would have mowed through everybody. They don't have that option. Juwan Roberts, the leader of the team, the heart and soul of the team. Senior day without him, Coach Sampson was basically crying because he couldn't even play. This is a really tough situation for Houston. It's not going to matter as much here against the 16 seed. I don't think this is a spot where, they're in danger of losing and having just, an absolute, nightmare scenario happening. I don't think SIU has the profile offensively to kind of pull this off. But it is going to be probably a little tougher than it needs to be. But this will be a good spot to get Javier Francis some more minutes. This will be a good spot to let JoJo Tugler just absolutely pillage. In these 116 matchups, you really want to look to the front court. This is where the big men kind of come to play. When we get to the DFS side of things over the next couple of days, Tugler is going to be in a great position here. Francis will be in a great position here. Those secondary players for Houston are going to be just absolutely destroy. But I think guards-wise, could have some struggles here because SIU's perimeter defense, it's harassing. Obviously, it's harassing in a whole different level. That's not the Big 12. I recognize that. I'm not going to pretend the Ohio Valley Conference is some super difficult conference, but they do have some guys. They've got some, Little Rock, very good program, Southeast Missouri, Tennessee Tech. Like, there's all players, and they're already hitting the portal, too. Guys who are averaging 18, 19, 20 points a game. They've got dudes. But they're not going to beat Houston. So we'll move Houston along here. Gonzaga versus Georgia. This is gut check time here. I think Gonzaga, their Sweet 16 streak is on the line. 9 straight Sweet 16s. Second longest tournament streak behind Duke for making appearances in the tournament. Just, death taxes and Gonzaga making the tournament and Gonzaga making the Sweet 16. We kind of learned the hard way last year, a lot of us, most of us, when we picked Gonzaga to lose in the first round. Remember, it was all about, man, they're going to lose to this upstart mid-major squad. They've got Will Wade, like McNeese State. They're going to beat Gonzaga. They're going to knock them off their pedestal. Can't possibly win this game. They're a 5 seed. No. They ended up beating McNeese State, and it wasn't even a game. McNeese State was out of it by the first 5 minutes. It was actually disgusting to see how it played out, 86-65. I picked McNeese State in that game, and I had McNeese State guys in DFS. The whole thing was just bad. So you kind of learn that lesson with Gonzaga, but then you have to remind yourself because then you get to the next season and you want to doubt them again. And you're sitting here in an 8-9 game against a tough Georgia squad, but I don't think that they're going to lose to Georgia. In fact, I'm not even sure if Georgia is going to be that competitive. I feel like this Gonzaga team, battle-tested veterans, been here multiple times. Georgia, Asa Newell's great, one and done. Thanks for your one season here in collegiate basketball. But I don't know that Georgia is going to have the chops here to compete with a refocused Gonzaga team. The Gonzaga team we saw in the WCC tournament, that looked like the killer team that we're used to seeing in March. They kind of sleptwalked through the season a bit. St. Mary's, got the regular season crown by a few games. beat Gonzaga twice. But in that tournament, that was a different version of Gonzaga. And that's a version of Gonzaga that's made 9 straight Sweet 16s. So they're going to beat Georgia. I think we see SEC as tough as they are. We're going to see quite a few. I mean, you get 14 teams in a conference. Some of them are going to lose in the first round, second round. Like, they're going to drop early. And I think we see a bunch. Remember the year Big Ten had all those teams in, and they ended up getting like 1 into the Sweet 16. I don't think that happens to the SEC, but we're going to see probably half of them drop out in the first round or two. But that's just the sheer number of SEC teams. But I do move Gonzaga in over Georgia. Clemson versus McNeese. This starts a very interesting, intriguing, exciting pod of games where upsets could just absolutely ravage the Midwest. Much like the South, I think there's some very real upset potential here with several teams. Now, McNeese back in a position. They're a trendy upset pick taking on Clemson. They're in the 5-12 matchup, which automatically is going to get them selected because people come to expect the 12s over the 5s. Doesn't happen as much as I think people think it does, but it happens. The tendency here is to want to pick McNeese, right? They have the team this year compared to last year is actually a little bit better. Will Wade once again went into the portal and just brought in a ton of guys that can score. Quadir Copeland from Syracuse, Sincere Parker from St. Louis. And the funny thing about those guys is they're not even main options on this team. McNeese is just super deep. They can turn to a lot of different places. Javon Garcia, if I had to say, one guy was their best player overall, I would say it's probably, Javon Garcia, former UMass transfer, wears the cool Batman face mask thing. They have Christian Shamati. They've got DJ Richards. They've got a bunch of different options. Brandon Murray, who was a starter earlier in the season, he's been coming off of the bench here lately in the last month of the season. He's the former LSU, Georgetown, and Ole Miss transfer, so he's been around the way. This is a very good McNeese State team. Doesn't necessarily come with the tournament experience that you'd like to see, although Javon Garcia was part of that embarrassing loss last year, so they can lean on him. This will be a close game. One way or another, this will be a close game. Clemson is without Dylan Hunter, who defensively is an important piece. Offensively, not so much. As a facilitator, maybe. But he doesn't necessarily take Clemson from a top caliber team down to I can't pick them. Dylan Hunter's hurt. Like, what are they going to do? Chase Hunter, fantastic. He's playing the best basketball of his life right now. Since Dylan went out, Chase has had 2 monster games in the ACC tournament. And he wasn't even like breaking a sweat out there half the time. They have a great front court. Ian Schifflin and Victor Larkin play off of each other extremely well. If they stay out of foul trouble, that's going to be a hard situation for McNeese State to deal with. Jaden Zachary's been great. I shouldn't even say he's been great. He's been steady. Del Jones, the freshman off the bench, he's starting to come into his own a little bit. Jake Heidbreder, the Air Force transfer, is getting more minutes, although I don't know what that last game was for him. He looked awful, but perhaps we get some good minutes out of him. I do think Clemson wins this game. I don't want to pick them. I want to pick McNeese. Every ounce of me wants to pick McNeese. I'll probably bet the spread here in favor of McNeese. But I think they fail a second time in a row. And part of this might have to do with the fact that Will Wade is in these, rumors and coaching stuff and everything happening. I'm not saying his foot's out the door by any means or his attention is going to be elsewhere. He's also facing his alma mater. If you don't know, he went to Clemson. There was a interview where he talked about their fight song and how he might dance to it. And then he said, I'm just kidding. Like, it was a very weird interview. I wasn't super feeling great about it after I saw it and picking McNeese State. So I do think they have a realistic chance of beating Clemson, especially if one of Schifflin or Larkin get into foul trouble. Jace Hunter isn't playing at this elite level that he has been. Somebody else will have to step up, perhaps Chauncey Wiggins hitting some threes. But I do think Clemson does ultimately win this one. As much as I'd love this to be another 12 versus 13 in the second round, how great would that be to see multiple 12s versus 13s in the second round of a tournament? I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll pick Clemson here. Now we get to a game where I'm very confident in one direction here, and it's the 4-13 versus between Purdue and High Point. Purdue, Two-man show, Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. When they're away from Mackey, they're a much different team. They're not nearly as dominant. Fletcher Lawyer, he's solid at home. When you take him out of the confines of Mackey and on a neutral or road situation, he's not hitting shots. The rest of the rotation, it's either role players such as Caleb First, or it's youngsters like CJ Cox or Miles Bunny Coven. Not exactly guys who I would be very comfortable or confident in against a team like High Point filled with upperclassmen and veterans. Now, they're not tournament tested veterans, at least in the NCAA tournament. You got me there, but they've been in high pressure, high situation games, high intensity games before. Purdue, one of those, I wrote up I had the March Madness. It's such a negative connotation to it, but I did have that piece that came out earlier, the March Madness frauds, more of a, teams that I think could get upset. Purdue was on that list for me. High Point is the complete opposite of Purdue in terms of they have crazy amounts of depth. And I know that sometimes depth can be overrated in the tournament. I get that. Sometimes I overvalue it. I recognize that. But in these early rounds, especially, having that depth is such a huge advantage, because if somebody gets into foul trouble, God forbid an injury happens, anything, or you just need to give your guy an extended water break, not having drop off to the second unit is such a mind-melting experience for your opponent, because they expect your second unit to come in and you be able to take advantage of them. Okay, their second unit guys are coming in. Let's push here. Let's draw some fouls. Let's take it to the rack. Let's just, kind of overwhelm them so they have to force in the starters again with foul trouble or whatever it might be. That doesn't happen with High Point. It was never more prevalent than in the Big South tournament, when High Point in the title game struggled mightily. Winthrop was up by double digits late. Get into the last 10 or 11 minutes, Winthrop's up by 15. So, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Everybody who loves mid-majors freaking out. I want High Point in the tournament. I want the opportunity for good quality mid-majors to be in the tournament, not only to have the upset potential, but I'm always thinking about DFS and fantasy, right? Hardwired that way. That's my thing. That's my deal. I know betting is taking off. I know Dynasty, all this other stuff. DFS sometimes gets forgotten about by people, but that's my thing, right? So I'm always thinking about DFS matchups. I'm starting to freak out because I Winthrop, they've got some guys. I guess Kelton Telford, I can deal with him in the tournament. He's somebody I can get behind. Sean Harrison, he's good. I guess we can talk him up. Like, I'm starting to think about how I can rope Winthrop into being a DFS asset. I'm sad, definitely sad about it. And then suddenly, all of High Point starters who are just playing awful. The most inopportune time to have your worst game of your season, maybe even your career. All 5 stars at the same time. God, what bad luck could you have, right? Well, High Point's coach has Alan Huss, the fortitude, testicular fortitude, shout out to Nick Foley for that, to bench his guys and teach a life lesson. Now, ordinarily, I'll make fun of a coach or I'll be tilted. I'll be angry. Like, yeah, they're out here teaching life lessons. Pettiford's playing 13 minutes today. Thanks, Bruce Pearl. I'm glad you're teaching him a life lesson about you've made a bad pass, so he needs to sit now. Might lose the game, but we got to teach that life lesson. He taught a life lesson to his starters at High Point, and it was the best decision I'd seen all season long from any team at any level. He went to his second unit, which, let's talk about the second unit for a minute. Let's talk about their first unit first. Kazal Giffa, who's amazing. I did a profile on him. Great scoring guard. Kamani Hamilton, who's fantastic, low post player, spent a season at Mississippi State where he didn't play much, but SEC caliber player, has been fantastic. Chase Johnson, who's a graduate transfer from Dunk City, Florida Gulf Coast, he's been solid. He's a great 3-point shooter, one of the top 3-point shooters in the Big South. Jocelyn Bodo, it's a fun name to say. I get it. Shot blocking extraordinary, can rebound as good as anyone. Defensively, he's been the defensive player of the year already. He's great. Demarion Williams, their 5th starter, Texas Tech transfer. Spent a couple years at Gardner-Webb, did his thing, but then he was at Texas Tech as a role player. Very good player, a great 3-point shooter in his own right. Like, that's a pretty solid starting 5. You've got 3 different players with high major experience. You've got a sophomore 7-footer in Justin Bodo, who had offers for NIL to leave last year and didn't. That's a pretty strong mid-major starting lineup for anyone. You wouldn't expect them to have anything left over to have a quality bench. But oh, contraire, let's look at their bench. Bobby frickin' Pettiford. He is a cast off, and this is how I'm not going to get into sidebar here too much. I know I do that, but I always say, like, yeah, it's the transfer portal era, NIL. Yes, everybody's going to say high majors are killing them. They're taking their best players. But if you're a low or high major, you need to be mining those high major teams and taking their cast offs or their dirty laundry, I guess you can say. Bobby Pettiford spent 2 uninspiring seasons with Kansas where he didn't really play a whole lot his freshman year. He did play 32 games his sophomore year, but he wasn't much of a factor, right? Though those minutes were, 8, 12, 15. Like, he wasn't playing much, right? He goes to ECU, becomes a pretty dang good player there at ECU. He had his struggles, sure, but he was a big-time factor. Started the first half of the season, then they moved to the bench. Kind of fizzled out there at the end. Now he transfers to High Point and he becomes a total stud, but they use him as a second unit guy because there's no drop off between the starting 5 and that bench, at least at point guard. It's a mind meld for your opponent because they just don't get any reprieve. Arguably, Bobby Pettiford could start over the other guards, maybe not Kazak Giffa, but certainly over Damarian Williams. 30% assist rate, highest in the Big South, coming off your bench. Now, Bobby Pettiford, he's a great facilitator. Maybe not as known as a great scorer, but at this level, he can be. And he took 18 shots in that championship game. The second half, the last 10 minutes, it was a thing of beauty. Every play, whether it was a scored basket, he had either scored it or he assisted on it. And he was amazing. That was one of the best sequences. I would implore you to go on if you have ESPN Plus, you can watch games on demand or just go on YouTube and see if you can find it. But the High Point versus Winthrop championship game, the last 10 minutes, I would really encourage, if you're not sure, you're not following me on this upset potential against Purdue, watch that 10-minute period. Come back and tell me that they're not upsetting Purdue. Not only was Pettiford great, Trey Benham was knocking down shots. Abdullah Tiem was just absolutely wrecking them. Fast break buckets galore. Terry Anderson was hitting shots. All these bench pieces came in. They played the last 10 minutes. The starters didn't see the floor again from the 11th minute of the second half on. They did not come back in. The second unit closed out and won the Big South Championship down 15 to then winning handily. It's so impressive by 12. So that's a huge, huge accomplishment, knowing that this team, they're going to beat you first unit, second unit. There's no drop off in production. Now, that was a little extreme because that 10-minute period, that was just like one of those like once in a lifetime type of runs. But there's guys on this High Point team who are going to make life miserable for Purdue. Now, the analytics side is going to tell you Purdue's going to beat High Point, and they make a good case. Purdue, terrorizes teams that fall back to pick and roll, all that stuff. Braden Smith should feast in this matchup. I admit he's a problem. But Braden Smith hasn't been uber consistent necessarily lately. Granted, High Point, maybe not your run-of-the-mill Big Ten team. This is a tournament. Anybody can beat anybody on any given day. Purdue, I do not trust. Matt Painter, they did shake things off. They made a deep run in the tournament, Natty, right? They were this close to winning it, although UConn was so dominant. Shook off the loss to the 16 seed, but you go back and look at Matt Painter and Purdue's history, like this is just a spot for them to lose early. And I just don't trust Purdue. Trey Kaufman-Wren's been great. Braden Smith has been great most of the time, but I don't think that Fletcher Lawyer has a great game here. I don't think we get a lot out of the freshmen. They're going to be a little overwhelmed, right? Are we thinking Caleb First has a dominant game? Those non-con games early in the season where Caleb First was scoring 30 fantasy points, do we think he gets back to that form? Maybe. But this High Point team has a legitimate 10-man rotation that will absolutely demoralize your dreams. So for that reason, I got to pick High Point. I know that's very long-winded, but I had to drive home the point of why I think High Point, because every other preview you're going to read is going to say, yes, High Point's a great team. They're a fun story. But Purdue's, analytically speaking, Purdue's going to win. But I think High Point's going to surprise some folks here. Shout out, High Point has been a team of mine for a long time. You may have, I don't know, maybe you've been with me for a while, maybe you haven't. But, over the last decade, I've had a numerous amounts of my guys that I like, hashtag Walt's guys, Dub's guys, whatever you want to say. And High Point had One player in particular that was so fun to watch. They made the NIT because they ended up losing in the Big South tournament. This would have been in racking my brain, 2016. John Brown. Those of you who follow EuroLeague are probably familiar with John Brown. Absolute stud. Wore the goggles, was a menace. Amazing efficiency rates. They got blown out in the NIT to South Carolina. That may have been the year that South Carolina won the NIT, actually. But this is a great story. John Brown, it'd be nice to see him there at the game. One of their most famous or best players ever. But I like a High Point to win here against Purdue. So that's where I'm at. What's up, Anthony? Do you like any totals? I'll give you some bets here. Yeah, I'll give you some bets here at the end. I'll get through the rest of the bracket and go. I had to say my spiel about High Point, so I had to get that off my chest. All right, Illinois versus the play-in game winner of Texas versus Xavier. I'll speed this up a little bit. Texas is a team that I wrote up and also in my March Madness frauds piece. The last couple of years, we've seen a team that maybe didn't deserve to be in the tournament have to play in the play-in game and just get absolutely just bricked. Virginia last year, that was a rough one. I think Texas honestly could be looking at a 20-point loss here against Xavier. Yes, Kendall Weaver's back. That's great. And Trey Johnson's a magnificent scorer, but Xavier, and I know their resume, we debated it yesterday and beyond, their resume maybe not great, not enough quad one wins, whatever, but Xavier is going to show they're at least better than Texas, and they're going to win by a fair amount. That was what was the line? Xavier -1.5 yesterday. That was one of the easiest bets that I ran to and grabbed. I'm just checking real quick. Now they're -3.5. So you got it yesterday at -1.5. Easy bet. -3.5, still fine. They're going to win by double digits. Mark my words. Anyhow, that's the play-in winner between those two. Then they're going to get Illinois. I like Illinois a lot. I have been talking to our dear friend Johnny and a few others. I think Illinois has a window of competitiveness. And when I say window, people automatically think like they're going to win the championship. Not this year, but I do think the championship window will be open for Illinois because their team is young. If they keep 3/4 of this squad together and hit the portal next year, plus the freshmen that they have coming in, Illinois is going to be a problem next year. We're talking about a top 3 seed easily. I know people are down on them. They're streaky. Xavier's a tough spot. Our man Randall, who was dead on with his Clemson pick last year, has nominated Xavier as his team to make a Final Four run coming out of the Midwest. I don't like picking against Randall. I don't. But I got to go with Illinois here. Will Riley is fantastic. Jack Agunusianis, Casper, as I like to call him, he's hit or miss. More miss lately, but he's still good. Tomislav Ivicevic, he's a problem. This matchup against Xavier, it'll be a fun one between him and Fremantle, but I do think he is like we saw against Iowa, I think Illinois just puts a big number on Xavier, and offensively they style. Really like Will Riley. I'm actually concerned Will Riley might jump to the NBA after the season, and if Illinois makes a minor run here, he might. If he comes back, he's a conference player of the year next year. That's how high I am on him as a whole and this Illinois team over the next 2 or 3 years. So I do have Illinois beating the play-in game winner here. Now, told you at the very beginning, a 14 would beat a 3. It's happened 3 times in the last 4 years. It's going to happen in this tournament. First 2, 3, 14 matchups we talked about, pretty confident in the 3 seed. This is where the fireworks happen. Troy as the 14 seed taking on Kentucky as a 3 seed. Now, when Kentucky won in the SEC tournament right before the Alabama game, that was against Oklahoma, right? They took a special effort from Otega Awe. He had scored like 1 million points, a last second, shot that he gets in. But they came away with that one even more injured than before. Awe's tired. Amari Williams was completely disinterested against Oklahoma. Still don't know what that was. Lamont Butler hurt again, still without Jackson Robinson. Immediately said, "Oh my God, this bet. What's Alabama?" They were like, was it -5.5? Like, run, don't walk to bet Alabama because they're going to curb stomp Kentucky. They're tired. They're injured. They're not winning this game. It's not going to be competitive. 99-70, it wasn't competitive. Granted, Otega Awe got she's, I don't know, smashed in the face by an elbow, was bleeding all over the court. It was horrendous. It was a rough look. They come into the tournament, and this is another one of the teams, multiple teams in this region that were in my susceptible article. We'll call it that instead of frauds. Frauds is a little negative. This is a very susceptible and vulnerable team. Again, tired, although they've got a few days off, more than a team like Michigan, sure. Injured. Lamont Butler's supposed to be available and play. How many minutes he's going to give him? We haven't seen Lamont Butler healthy, 100% healthy in months. I think he came back early, and he's not played well. You watch Kentucky games, Butler's been super cheap from a DFS standpoint. It was like we had to play him that one time, watched the game, said to my friend Aaron there in the Discord, he don't look right. Come back the next slate, he's even cheaper. The whole industry was on him. Said, we can't play this guy. He doesn't look right. Got hurt again, but even when he wasn't getting hurt, he just does not look himself. How much help is he really going to be? I don't think much. That means Kentucky is going to be without Jackson Robinson for sure, and they're going to be without a fully healthy Lamont Butler and a very banged up Otega Awe all of a sudden. Which version of Amari Williams is going to show up? The one that's dedicated, wants to bang down low, he's very gifted as a post player, or is it going to be the one that thinks he's a point guard all of a sudden and wants to play on the perimeter, wants to handle the rock and disrupt the offense? Which version of him shows up is going to be very important on top of the injuries. Andrew Carr, he's good. I like Andrew Carr. He fouls a lot. Brandon Garrison, he's great off the bench in small spurts. Then you have a handful of freshmen, Colin Chandler, Travis Perry, who have looked good in spurts. Trent Noah, they have looked decent in spurts. Once again, Colin Chandler playing big minutes lately. But those three guys, if they have to play significant minutes here against a scrappy Troy team, covering machine Scott Cross, that's Randall's boy. This is a problematic matchup for Kentucky. Ken Palm has them winning by 12. I don't buy it. The line was 10.5. I did take Troy plus 10.5. I think they cover with ease. If you don't know much about Troy, you didn't get a chance to see them that last slate. Well, they were on the slate twice, weren't they? I think a couple of the Sun Belt semifinals. No, that wasn't on there. The Sun Belt final was. It's because the props were. They took care of business, and 75-59 against Old Dominion, 79-60 against a very good James Madison team, and then 94-81 against Arkansas State. They completely slapped around their opponents throughout the Sun Belt tournament. That Arkansas State team is loaded with talent. They made them look like a JV squad. Tayton Connerway is fantastic. He is going to be a huge problem for Kentucky. This is a guy we're talking about can put up 20 and 10 for sure. They have Miles Rigsby, who's awful against James Madison, but he does a very good job of getting to the foul line, and he showed that in the championship game against Arkansas State. He had 20 points, 9 of which came at the line. They have a litany of talented physical wings like Jackson Fields, Thomas Dowd. Marcus Rigsby plays kind of he's smaller, but he plays a much bigger than he is. And then they have Cooper Campbell, the freshman, who's been kind of a revelation off the bench. This Troy team has guys. Kentucky could be turnover prone here. They do turn it over. We could see Troy take advantage of that. Troy is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. If they get Amari Williams or Brandon Garrison into foul trouble, that's going to rear its ugly head. And this is a team with the 7th best defensive efficiency when it comes to steals percentage. They are forcing a lot of turnovers. Kentucky, they may not full season be the most turnover-prone team by any means, but lately, especially over the course of the SEC part of the season, have looked like a completely different team in that regard. And that just has to do with all the injuries that they have. So this is the 14/3 that you've been waiting for. Troy Trojans over Kentucky. This upset's happening. Now, in the past, I've gotten married to an upset pick that ended up not happening, and I was a little bit worried about this one because I'm very high on it. But going through today for my article that I wrote about the possible upsets, doing some deeper research on it, really just analyzing the matchups and really looking at what Lamont Butler was going to be able to offer them, I just don't see how they beat this team. I don't see how they beat Troy. It's going to take another Herculean performance from Otega Awe. He's probably going to have to score 30 or 40. Can happen. Troy's covering. Betting wise, this is the spot. Troy plus 10.5. Sprinkle the money line because this is the spot. 14 beating a 3 happens right here. All right, UCLA versus Utah State in the 7-10. Another 7-10 matchup that really wasn't that hard for me to pick. I do like UCLA. I'll move them along. It's not even really that I like UCLA. I just like them better than Utah State. Utah State has some real talent here, especially at the guard positions. We've seen throughout the MWC part of the season, Ian Martinez, Mason Falsev play really well. Mason Falsev is a transfer candidate. I think some P4s are going to become calling here. And then, of course, we've seen Carson Templin, kind of fits the profile of a March hero, goofy looking guy who can score and do some things. He does TikTok videos, and that's kind of a detriment. Sorry to say. You can't do that. You can't do those TikTok trends if you're on a legitimate tournament team. That is a downside here for me. Carson Templin doing those videos, not cracking. Don't do it again. If you're a teammate of his, you got to tell him to stop. Anyhow, UCLA, too tough here defensively. Mick Cronin will probably get a tech in this game just for the hell of it. I think that UCLA is going to be with us a very short time in this tournament, but I do think they beat Utah State. Tennessee versus Wofford, the Vols. Rick Barnes, he has notoriously struggled right in the tournament here as a volunteer. Now, they made a deep run last year, and that was great, but a lot of second-round exits for Ricky Barnes. We know that. And this is a spot where I'm not worried about him against Wofford, but as we get into the tournament, it's going to be something that they're going to have to overcome. Did definitely overcome it last year, but you also had Dalton Connect on the squad, and you don't have a Dalton Connect this time. Chaz Lanier's been great, but you saw mistakes, fouling. Like, he got himself into foul trouble, and he just never got out of it, and it was completely inexcusable. That can't happen. We saw it with others. Jordan Gainey stepped up in a big way for the Vols, and they're going to need him to play like that in the tournament. Can he string together 6 games like that? Remains to be seen. Zakai Zeigler, we know he can hard carry. Unfortunately for them, Igor Milicic has completely fallen apart. Remember, he played for Charlotte for a while. He was solid on Charlotte. I think he was overachieving as a member of the Vols here, but he is who he is. He's going to be really cheap on the slate, and it's going to be a decision to play him or not, but I don't trust him whatsoever. They will beat Wofford, but I think it's going to be an uglier game, and I think we're going to be looking at a real poor shooting day from the Vols. It's going to make people nervous for that second-round matchup with the Bruins. All right, Houston versus Gonzaga. Sweet 16 streak is on the line. Can we realistically pick them against a semi-injured Houston team? If Juwan Roberts can't go, I think I'm very scared. If he does, I like them against the Zags. I don't want to pick against the Zags. I really don't. It scares me to do so because this streak is very real. And when it comes to tournaments, Mark Few is that dude. I think Juwan Roberts is just healthy enough to show up for this game. So I am going to pick Houston over Gonzaga. Clemson versus High Point. This is an interesting spot. Every fiber of me wants to pick High Point. I think High Point has the chops to kind of mow Clemson down. They have an injury as well. We mentioned with Dylan Hunter, the second unit. I went all into it. I don't need to rehash it. Clemson is very tough, but I think the detriment is they had the soft conference schedule, right? They nobody in the ACC aside from Louisville, sometimes North Carolina and Duke, really challenge them too much. Will they take High Point seriously? Certainly, but I think this High Point team has real chops, real opportunity to make a second weekend appearance. So with that being said, I am going to pick High Point as the 13 seed to beat Clemson. I think this High Point team is for real. I honestly do. Chaos in the Midwest. Illinois versus Troy. Troy, it's a fun story beating Kentucky. Last time a 14 beat Kentucky, it wasn't that long ago. They went on to make a huge tournament run. Could Troy be that Oakland team this year? I don't think they will. I'm a big believer in Illinois. Yes, you want teams coming into the tournament super hot. We'll talk about Colorado State in a minute. You really, don't want teams kind of limping in. Illinois had a rough exit from the Big Ten tournament after absolutely walloping Iowa, but a matchup against Xavier or Texas and a matchup against Troy, it's going to really showcase that offense. They're healthy. Morez Johnson is back. Give me Illinois over Troy. Tennessee versus UCLA, another ugly one for the Vols. Physical game. Mick Cronin, if he doesn't get a tech against Utah State, he definitely gets a tech here. He is so annoying to watch, right? But the Vols have enough pieces. Again, the shooting woes may continue, but it's not like UCLA is going to shoot the lights out by any means. If it's a physical game, the Vols will be able to eke this one out and send UCLA packing. So the Vols do advance. Houston versus High Point. Don't worry, I'm not picking another 1 seed to the Final Four, but I don't know that I can pick the High Point Panthers, who I absolutely love to get over Houston. Houston's defense is just too tough. It's just far too tough. So the run stops here for High Point, but a very successful year. And they keep mining the portal for P4 castoffs. This is a way for mid-majors to be successful. So Houston moves on here to the regional final. Illinois versus Tennessee. Last time I picked the Vols to make the Final Four or a deep run a couple of seasons ago, they lost in like the second round. I like Illinois here. I truly believe Illinois has the chops to win this game against Tennessee. I don't trust Rick Barnes, even with their deep run last year. They don't have Dalton Connect. Igor Milicic has really kind of just stopped overachieving, right? But Jordan Gainey, man, I just feel like I have this nagging feeling that Jordan Gainey is going to be the X factor of the tournament, especially in the Midwest region. Illinois offense is great, but when they run into some of these tougher defenses, they do have their struggles. I think it'll be a closer game, but the physical matchup of UCLA in the second round and overcoming poor shooting in the first round has Tennessee ready for this game against Illinois. Defensively, they pop Illinois in the mouth, and they do win this game to make the regional final against Houston, where they're battle tested. They're doing the physical thing. They're primed and ready. The Vols do knock off Houston. As much as I want to take Houston, they don't have Jamal Shed. I wish they did. Juwan Roberts, I'm really nervous about it overall. And LJ Cryer, who has been great. I just don't know if I see LJ Cryer and Milos Uzan as the backcourt to take Houston to the Final Four. So with that being said, the Vols do make the Final Four to take on Duke. Who's going to face Auburn? Let's get into the West here. Florida versus Norfolk State. The Gators. I have a future on Florida that we made about 2 or 3 months ago. What was it? Plus 1,800, I think. I don't have it handy here, but man, I just want Florida to win. Not only for that, but they just look so good. The way that they handled business in the SEC tournament, scary stuff. This Gators team, and I know everybody's picking them. They're good. I don't know who's going to beat them, but it's certainly not going to be Norfolk State. And I love Norfolk State. My man Christian Inge, who got us our point prop the other day. Maybe we'll look at his prop here against Florida. Love my man. Connecticut versus Oklahoma. A lot of people didn't think Oklahoma should be in the tournament, let alone a 9 seed, indicating they were very safe. I'm not too sure about that. UConn, people are down on them. Coming into last year, I said this team's winning a title again. They're that good. They have the pieces. That ended up being right. People said, are you going to call it a repeat? No, I'm certainly not. They don't have the same pieces. Alex Caravan is your number one. It'll never work. It hasn't really worked, but they're so battle-tested. You've got Hassan Diarra. You've got Alex Caravan. Oklahoma, not that same level of experience. You have players on UConn who have won championships. So UConn is going to beat Oklahoma here. And I don't think it's a blowout, but I also don't think it's one of those games where it's very close. I think they have a gap of 9 to 10 points throughout. This is the most controversial game of the tournament, not because Memphis got a 5 seed when most thought they should get an 8, but because it is such a huge play for me on the Memphis side. The rest of the industry and my counterparts here at FTN are all on Colorado State. Let's talk about it. Colorado State, hottest team in the country. They just ran through the Mountain West Conference. They're hot at the right time. This is when you want to pick a team, when they're fire, red hot, not even red hot, white hot. Colorado State is that. Nick Clifford, a has raised his profile into a probable NBA player. This Colorado State team is favored. It was -2.5 opening. Then it got to -3.5. Now it's back 2.5 again. Indicates that maybe Colorado State is, or Memphis is overseeded, right? Memphis is missing Tyrese Hunter. How could they possibly beat Colorado State? Can't happen, right? It just can't happen. Well, I'm here to tell you it can happen, and it's going to happen. Number one, this game and the Maryland Grand Canyon game are part of Session 1 at the Seattle first round games, Climate Pledge Arena, formerly Key Arena. I'm going to these games with my older son. We got tickets. Before the bracket was announced, we took a shot. We said, do we want Session 1? Do we want Session 2? We'll drive up. We'll drive up to Pacific Northwest, Washington State. We'll go. Do we want to go in the morning? Do we want to go in the night? Let's take Session 1. And Session 1 ended up being the right answer because this game is going to be fun either way. Now, let me tell you, Memphis, yes, Tyrese Hunter was in a boot yesterday. It's very likely he's not going to play in this game. And I know that is rough, not having Tyrese Hunter. But have you watched Memphis play? Have you seen Memphis play? Yes, Tyrese Hunter is good, but he's not the alpha on the team. He's not even a second option. Third option, very good third option. He can hit shots. He can take over when he needs to, but he never needs to. They have PJ Haggerty, who is absolutely a monster in every facet. When you need a bucket, Haggerty's going to get it for you. How many times this year did he just take over games? Just about every single time. And when Memphis is on a DFS slate, you damn well better roster Haggerty anytime he's under 10K. He's going to throw up 40. He always does. You're talking about a conference player of the year caliber guy, got the award, plays 91% of the team's minutes, so he never leaves the floor, and he does everything for this team. You mean to tell me Tyrese Hunter's injury means that Memphis can't get it done against Colorado State, yet they have PJ Haggerty? Now, if the injury was to Haggerty, then yes, I would fully be on board and say, damn, they can't win without PJ Haggerty. What are they going to do? Tyrese Hunter is good. I'm not saying otherwise. But you saw him at Texas. You saw him at Iowa State. At Iowa State, he was their key player there, yes. But at Texas, frequently in and out of consistency. Minutes were going by the wayside. There's times in the Texas games where he just was invisible on the floor. You mean to tell me Tyrese Hunter is going to be the reason Memphis can't beat Colorado State? Yes, they're hot. They're hot as you know what. Not only do they have PJ Haggerty still healthy, last I checked, they've got Dane Danger, who has emerged into one of the best big men in the country, not only as a low post shot blocker, rim protector, dunker. This dude's putting it on the floor and he's making plays. In the conference championship against UAB, he was bringing the ball up the floor like old school Shaq, bringing the ball up the floor, putting it on the deck, showing off some moves a little bit, right? Drawing fouls, and he had a damn near coast-to-coast play on UAB, and he got it at the top of the key 2 different times, and he drove for a layup, and everybody, because he's so large, just got the hell out of his way. Dane Danger has turned himself into a star. This isn't the little-used freshman from Baylor. This isn't the guy who fouled all the time at Illinois, although he does have a high foul rate, but he's been better about that lately. This is a completely different Dane Danger. This is a scary Dane Danger player that, honestly, I don't think he has another year. Might have one more year because of the transfer rules. If he comes back next year, you're talking about a guy who's going to be a easy first or second team All-American. I'm that confident in Dane Danger. Yes, line in the sand time for me. I'm taking Memphis. Danger's not hurt. Haggerty's not hurt. You saw in the championship game against UAB, they didn't have Tyrese Hunter. And yeah, it was close for a while, but they eventually wore UAB down. Colby Rogers had a really good game shooting the basketball, which he hasn't had lately, but Colby Rogers coming from Wichita State, where he was one of their better scorers. They get that version of Colby Rogers, who's not played as well the last month or two because Tyrese Hunter is there, and he's like the 4th or 5th option, Rogers. Now he moved up to the 3rd option. He scored 15 points, hit 3 threes. That's a big bonus, right? Baraka Okoji, one of their younger players, he came in and gave them 30 solid minutes, hit a couple threes, got a couple steals, 4 assists. Doesn't have to do a lot, just has to be adequate. PJ Carter, who we've seen off the bench, one of their little used players, but he's a solid role player. He hit a couple threes, gave them solid minutes. If the combination of Rogers, Carter, and Okoji can play like they did against UAB, where none of them had to be stars, none of them had to be elite, they just had to be adequate. That's it. Mo Cisse as your double barrel post play off the bench. There was lineups with Danger and Cisse out there against UAB. They were working together and dominating. Cisse, 1,000,000 blocks, 14 rebounds. Like, tell me again how Tyrese Hunter being injured is just death sentence for them. It's not good. It's certainly not good, but I am not seeing this the same way that everybody else apparently is. And this is how I like it. I'm Captain Leverage. I like to be line in the sand, you know, but when I'm finding these leverage spots or these you know, plays that nobody else is on, it's not just because it's leverage or nobody else is on them. There is a reason I'm on this play or on this team or making this bet or making this pick. Memphis has still, even without Tyrese Hunter, a much more formidable roster, a much deeper rotation, and guys capable. Even the bench pieces, Mo Cisse, Okoji, who started last game, PJ Carter even, they could be starters on numerous other teams. Cisse has been a starter. Cisse's played at Oklahoma State. He's been around the various places, right? Where was he? Ole Miss. Memphis at the beginning of his career, came home this year. So there's a lot of pieces on this team that can play. They can go 8 or 9 deep. Now, can we say the same thing about Colorado State? Yes, they're hot. They are absolutely hot. They mowed down, double barrel mowed down the Mountain West Conference and beat teams with ease. Nevada 67-59. Utah State 83-72, Boise State 69-56. They won in a myriad of ways. Nick Clifford is now 6th on the Ken Palm Player of the Year award rankings. May even argue that he's going to be the best player on the floor in this game against Memphis. What else does Colorado State have? Nico Medved, he's a great coach. Is he better than Penny Hardaway? Sure, I'll give you that. Medved is a better coach than Penny Hardaway. Fine. What else do they have? Kyan Evans, who's been a great, you know, kind of facilitating guard who can hit some shots. Sure, in the championship game, he had 3 points. He had 4 assists, a steal in 31 minutes. Okay. Jalen Lake, he's been a pretty good, you know, third option for them. Championship game, he had 5 points. He had 2 rebounds. Okay. Rashawn Mbemba, when he's not fouling, okay, he's playing 25 minutes. Surely he contributed. He had 1 point. He had 5 rebounds. Jalen Crocker Johnson, who I do like. He's a younger player. I will say I do like Jalen Crocker Johnson, transferred from Little Rock this year. Plays about 19 to 20 minutes a game. Solid. He had 8 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. Good. Bowen Bourne off the bench. Transfers over from Northern Iowa, where he was a high usage guy. High steal rate. You know, one of the more important players for Northern Iowa. Hasn't really translated here for Colorado State. He did hit 3 triples in that game, so he's contributing there. Ethan Morton, who transfers in from Purdue, longtime role player for Purdue. Okay, it's fine. He had 11, so some good contributions there. And then you have Kashawn Williams, who hit a couple of threes off the bench in 9 minutes, former high usage guy from Northern Illinois. So I just read off the roster of Colorado State to you, and I just read off the roster of Memphis to you. And I wanted to take a long time on this game because it's a very big point of contention for me against the rest of the industry. And if I'm wrong, I'll wear it. I always do. You guys know that. Nick Clifford is good. He's going to score probably 30 here against Memphis. What are the other guys going to do? I mean, they're not holding Memphis to 56 points. Let's just be honest about that with ourselves right now. Memphis is scoring 80 in this game. That's going to happen, with or without Tyrese Hunter. Can Colorado State score over 80 against Memphis with Nick Clifford scoring 30? Who else is going to put that number? Now, you might say, well, they scored 83 against Utah State. They absolutely did. 26 from Nick Clifford. You had 14 from Jalen Lake, who hit a couple of threes, and you had 14 from Kyan Evans. Then you had a bunch of guys, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. This is Nick Clifford and a bunch of role players versus Dane Danger, Haggerty, and Colby Rogers. And you can argue that Rogers is on the same level as Jalen Lake and Kyan Evans, fine. But Danger and Haggerty are on a different level right now. And that's still more than what Nick Clifford is going to give Colorado State. And he is really, really good. So I don't see it the same way as others. I don't see Tyrese Hunter being out that much of a problem. Will it be a problem? It could. Will I be wrong? Probably. Randall's a genius. Picked Clemson to go deep last year. He was right. He's picking Xavier to go deep this year. He'll probably be right. But just Memphis with the points, that's just a lock bet for me. I suspect Razzle is still on that as well. He's the one that brought it to my attention last night when the brackets were announced. I'm picking Memphis here. Sorry for the long-winded rant, but had to throw that one out there. So Memphis advances. Maryland versus Grand Canyon, 4 versus 13. Grand Canyon, love them. You know, they pulled an upset last year. Ty Grant Foster, he's not quite as good as last year. He's had some injuries. Jacoby Coles has been awesome. I just worry about fouls here for Grand Canyon. Coles is definitely going to get into foul trouble. Can Grant Foster avoid it? Can they get enough from their other guys? Derek Queen and Julian Reese are probably going to be super physical here. And when it comes to guard play, Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, who's emerged really well, Selton Miguel, Maryland just has the better guards. So as much as I'd love to sit here and tell you that Grand Canyon's going to win this game, I just can't. So Maryland is going to advance. Missouri versus Drake. This is another one I think will be a very popular upset. Missouri will have a less than 100% Mark Mitchell. But Missouri's just, they're gonna wear Drake down. I think this is one of those games where Drake will start out hot and Missouri will be backpedaling a bit. Missouri's got a legitimate 14-man roster that they will use with or without Mark Mitchell. And that, again, that's just going to mess with things. Drake's got 3 players that basically play all 40 minutes, and they're just going to get worn down. And in that second half, you're going to see some tired legs for Drake. You're going to see that fresh bodies for Missouri, and they're just going to keep cycling through guys. This is where Jacob Cruz is going to come into play, Warwick, Tamar Bates, who's been playing better lately. So I am going to take Missouri, which is another one that I think is against the public. Like Drake, don't get me wrong, but I think Missouri just has too many pieces there to wear Drake down. Texas Tech versus UNC Wilmington. This could be the 14/3. If it's not Troy over Kentucky, maybe it's Wilmington over Tech. Could be. Texas Tech has injuries. Chance McMillan, Darian Williams has been in and out, so we'll see what happens there. Wilmington has a pretty formidable roster at the mid-major level. I do think Tech gets through here with the JT Toppin explosion performance. And Christian Anderson, the young guard who's been filling in admirably whenever somebody's hurt, whether it's Darian Williams or Chance McMillan, he's played exceptionally well, and I think that continues here. So Texas Tech does move on. Kansas versus Arkansas. At first, I wanted to pick Arkansas because I do like their roster better, but then it came down to Calipari versus Bill Self, and the decision had to be made based off that. So I do pick Kansas to advance here over Arkansas. And then we have St. John's versus Nebraska. Nebraska, some dudes, they've been fun. St. John's, Rick Pitino. I mean, this is a formidable St. John's squad. Certainly not going to be a situation where they lose to a 15 seed. Pitino will have them ready. Saw them in the Big East tournament. They looked unbeatable at times, dealing with their own health issues, but they've got some absolute monsters on this roster. All right, Florida versus UConn. The defending champs, UConn, facing a team that's arguably as dominant as they were last year. A recipe for disaster. I think UConn gives Florida a game initially before they bow out. I think it's going to be very tough for them to win this one. So we'll take Florida here. Memphis versus Maryland. I still really like Memphis, man. I do. I really like Memphis to possibly even beat Maryland. Now, you can get on me for the Tyrese Hunter entry here against Maryland because Maryland has more pieces than Colorado State to worry about. And they have a short bench, but that starting 5 that they have is very, very good. And I do think they do edge out Memphis here. if Danger gets into foul trouble, which that's the breaking point here, going up against Derek Queen and Julian Reese, I think he'll take one of those two with him to the bench, but then the other one's just going to feast. And Mo Cisse probably headed for foul trouble too. So Maryland here for me. Texas Tech versus Missouri. This is a very tough one because if Darian Williams isn't 100% and Chance McMillan's not back, I don't think they beat Missouri. I think this is a potential upset here. Gonna be rough. If Tech is at full strength, McMillan can somehow come back, Darian Williams can somehow be close to 100%, then I think they win, even with Mark Mitchell not at 100%. But I think Tech is admirably going to get a valiant effort from JT Toppin, but I don't think that they're going to be able to beat Missouri because of the same reason that I said against Drake. They just have too many guys they're going to throw at them. Kansas versus St. John's. Bill Self versus Patino. That'll be a fun story, but St. John's, again, I've seen their roster. RJ Lewis, he's incredible. Big East Player of the Year. Zuby Ejiofor will get some revenge narrative here against a team that really didn't give him a chance. And then you have Kadari Richmond, who in a tournament setting is going to be absolute nails. Give me St. John's over Kansas. Florida against Maryland. This will be a solid matchup. Florida's got the front court. Maryland, of course, has the front court. Florida has guard play. Maryland has some guard play. But I just see Florida mowing teams down. I think that, they have a test from Connecticut, but end up winning by 10 plus at the end. I think they get a test from Maryland, end up winning by 10 plus at the end. Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Alex Condon, just too formidable. Give me Florida. Missouri versus St. John's. Missouri, it'll be a good story. I mean, Coach Gates is phenomenal. For Missouri to go from 2 years ago in the tournament, they dropped out, but they did win a game, and then to be horrible last year like they were, and then to be this good, just retooling, reloading from the transfer portal, and getting some guys back like Tamar Bates. It's really speaks volumes about how good of a coach Gates is on the floor, but also understands the dynamics of the NIL era. So respectable performance here in the tournament for him, but St. John's and Patino, they're just a one-man wrecking, or they're just a bulldozer of a team. Patino is a great coach. RJ Lewis, he's the one-man wrecking crew when Zuby is into foul trouble. And I think this Missouri front court does give Zuby a little bit of a headache, but I think Lewis and Kadari just too strong. I think it's always going to be every iteration of the tournament, regardless of what happens elsewhere, this region is always going to be Florida and St. John's. No matter how many times you replay it, no matter how many different analysts you listen to, Florida versus St. John's is eternal. They are the Thanos of the bracket. They are inevitable. Florida versus St. John's. Who wins Florida versus St. John's? This could go either way for me. I think Florida, they're just, the way that they handled business in the SEC tournament tells me, hey, Alex Condon, he didn't have the best tournament. Did it matter? It didn't matter. They've got Thomas Howell. They've got Micah Handlogden, who, he's not doing much statistically, but his presence on the floor, disrupting shots, making great passes, he's doing things that just raise this team up. Ruben Chignello, he's going to be physical. He's going to absolutely put one on Zuby. That physicality is ultimately going to be what tips the scales here for Florida, and they can just win a myriad of ways, and that is why I am picking the Gators to beat St. John's. I hate it. I hate it. That's 3 number 1 seeds in the Final Four, but I mentioned this is going to be a tournament where I think chaos happens everywhere, but when we get to the Final Four, it's going to be chalky. Top seeds are going to get through. So the Final Four, Florida versus Auburn. SEC foes know each other well. Janai Broom will do his best, but this Florida team just has their number. Taking the Gators to the Natty. Duke versus Tennessee. Cooper Flagg, by now, he's just, he's got his ankle held together however he can. Tennessee has been battle-tested, won in ugly fashion every single game. Duke has on their back heels. Halftime, I think the Vols are up here. People are starting to talk about, man, failed opportunity. Duke's not going to do it. Cooper Flagg, the probably the National Player of the Year getting hurt. That's just too bad. Duke gave it a valiant effort. They made the Final Four. It's great. But then I think in the second half, you see, wait a minute, Con Knipple, Zion James, Kaman Malawak. Wait, we won the ACC tournament without Cooper Flagg. we can do this. They make a run. They turn it around. Tennessee doesn't have enough offensively to deal with a hot shooting Duke team in the second half. That means Duke versus Florida is going to be our national championship game. And probably no surprise because I've been talking about them like this as a terminator of a team. The Florida Gators are going to pull. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. The Florida Gators are going to win the national championship. We're going to cash those future tickets on them. This Florida team is too deep, too good, battle-tested being in the SEC. If you come out of the SEC conference this year looking the way that Florida did, how could you ever pick against them? They're 30-4, and they played in the SEC conference that beat the hell out of each other. South Carolina could barely win a game in the SEC. They go and play, Clemson, and they smack them around. This SEC conference is ridiculously hard. They got 14 teams in for a good reason. Florida, #1 offensive efficiency, number 10 defensive efficiency. They play with some pace, 59th in overall tempo. They have really, really good everything. The only knock, I guess you can say, is that they're coached by Todd Golden, who is yet to feel the taste of a tournament win with any success. But this team with Florida, with what he has, this is a really, really sweet spot. Got to take the Gators here. So my national champion is Florida. It's a bit of a chalky Final Four. I hate it, but that's what we're going to do. Anthony, I know I told you I'd give you some totals here at the end. Ran a little bit long here. I will give you two that I noticed right away. One being the VCU BYU game. It's a total of 146.5. BYU can get it done offensively, but VCU, it'll behoove them to make that one a little bit uglier. I do like the under 146.5 in that one. Feels like about 6 too many. And then Yale versus Texas A&M. That one sits a total of 139.5. That's one where I think Yale just shoots lights out. I do think the over 139.5 there. We'll give you a bunch more bets and DFS stuff. Tomorrow, Mike Cutry will be on again, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll get into all the betting matchups in the first round and DFS stuff. It won't be necessarily a slate breakdown, but it'll be everything that you need to be ready for that first round, at least day one. Me and Mike connecting back up. Don't want to miss that. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you hanging on. I know it ran a little bit long. Tournament show or bracket show normally does. Make sure that you have those notifications on the FTN network here on YouTube so you do not miss when we go live. And also have those notifications turned on at DubDeuces85 on Twitter. I will be posting all relevant injury news, starting lineups, tournament-related stuff, and the free content that we still have coming through. And come on, March 20% off with that code. Get yourself over to FTN. Hang out with us in the Discord all tournament long. We will find you those green screens and window trips. I promise. Thanks, guys. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.